Turn mine down as low as I can get it. All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the North Miami Planning Commission meeting of December 6, 2022. At this time, call the meeting to order. I don't have my gavel, so I will knock on the desk, call the meeting to order. Madam Secretary, when you get a chance, we'd like to go ahead and call the roll, please.
Going to do so right now. Thank you, Chair. We're going to start with Chairman Ernst,
Present.
Commissioner Naomi Lemire,
Supposedly, I believe she was confirmed to show.
she was confirmed.
All right.
Okay. Commissioner McDermott,
Present.
okay. Commissioner Each is excused. Commissioner Medina,
Present.
Commissioner Clark did as well say he would be present, so I guess we'll put a question mark for now. Commissioner Bob
Present.
and Commissioner Besson.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, and we have quorum.
We should.
Ask the staff, do we have any amendments to the agenda? Very good. Move for approval of minutes of November 1st, 2022.
Second.
Dr. Medina moves to approve, seconded by Commissioner McDermott. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Minutes have been accepted. Any communications
Yes, sir.
you wish
Couple
to
of
give us?
things. First, let's talk about your January meeting. It's normally it would be January 3rd, and I wanted to see if you all needed to move that or if you were fine with January 3rd as your next meeting date. And if you do want to move it, did you want to move it later that week or to the following week?
I'm fine for the 3rd, the Tuesday the 3rd. Anyone have any objections to that, or they're good with that date?
No.
All right. You'll be out of the country. Okay. If we have enough for a quorum or agree to that, then let's shoot for the 3rd.
Okay, sir.
All right?
Okay, and then before you, in your package with your agenda, you'll see that we have an updated Planning Commission schedule for 2023. And July 4th is one of your normal dates. Of course, that's 4th of July. We'll be reaching out to you all to reschedule that date,
Okay.
unless you want to schedule it now.
No, let's wait
Okay.
to move, in case there's no, let the record
And,
show that Mr. Clark
okay.
has joined us, Madam Secretary.
All right, and
Good
that's
evening,
the
Ed
end of,
Frutality, sir.
that's the end of my communications.
All right, very good, thank you. Just to catch you up, sir, we all agreed that we're fine with the meeting on January 3rd of 2023. And we just agreed to wait on rescheduling to July 4th meeting because of falling the Tuesday. We'll wait till later on next year to address that issue. So now we can go ahead and open up the public hearing portion of our meeting. Our first item will be PC 1766. This is a quasi-judicial, this is not quasi-judicial, only.
No, only item number 2
Item number 2.
Right.
All right, thank you very
This is
much.
legislative.
Very good. So let me go ahead and read into the record. PC 17-66, which is an ordinance of the mayor and the city council of the city of North Miami, Florida, amending Volume 1, Goals, Objectives, and Policies of the City of North Miami 2036 Comprehensive Plan, specifically by amending the official 2036 Future Land Use Map to extend the boundary of the Special Development and Transit-Oriented Development, better known as the SDTOD Overlay District, by 2 parcels of real property totaling approximately 2.24 acres in size, located at 2025 Northeast 143rd Street, folio number 06-2221-027-0010, and a vacant parcel located in the northwest quadrant of Northeast 144th Street and Northeast 20th Lane, folio number 06-2221-006-0130, to encourage compact mixed use, transit-oriented development in accordance with Section 166.041, parentheses C, parentheses 3, parentheses C, Florida Statutes 2021, and Sections 3-1002, 3-1003, 3-1005 through 3-1007, and Section 3-302 of the City of North Miami Code of Ordinances, Chapter 29, entitled Land Development Regulations, declaring this zoning map amendment to be consistent with the City Comprehensive Plan, further authorizing the city manager to do all things necessary to effectuate the zoning map amendment, providing for repeal, conflicts, severability, codification, and for an effective date. May we have staff report, please?
Mr. Chair, for the record, Debbie Love, City Planner, Community Planning and Development. These 2 items are companion items. Would you like to read them together and then you vote on them separately?
Yes, I would.
Okay, sir.
Thank you very much. I'll read that also, and then if we're doing, okay. So the next item that staff has asked me to read in will be PC 17-67, an ordinance of the mayor and the city council of the city of North Miami, Florida, amending Chapter 29 of the City of North Miami Code of Ordinances entitled Land Development Regulations, at Article 1, entitled General Provisions, specifically at Section 1-106, entitled Official Zoning Map, to extend the boundary of the Special Development and Transit-Oriented Development, known as SDTOD, Overlay District, by 2 parcels of real property, totaling approximately 2.24 acres in size, located at 2025 Northeast 143rd Street, folio number 06-2221-027-001, and a vacant parcel located in the northwest quadrant of Northeast 144th Street and Northeast 20th Lane, folio number 06-221-006-0130, to encourage compact mixed-use, transit-oriented developments in accordance with Section 166.041, parentheses 3, parentheses C, Florida Statutes 2021, and Sections 3-1002, 3-1003, 3-1005 through 3-1007, and Section 3-302 of the City of North Miami Code of Ordinances, Chapter 29, entitled Land Development Regulations, declaring this zoning map amendment to be consistent with the City Comprehensive Plan, further authorizing the city manager to do all things necessary to effectuate the zoning map amendment, providing for repeal, conflicts, severability, codification, and for an effective date. Staff?
So,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, since we're going to be doing item 2, I should give my quasi-judicial instructions.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you. And what we do is we apply the stricter standard to both hearings, which will be combined.
Right.
So these rules apply to applications on specific parcels of land, like zoning map amendments, special exceptions, variance, and conditional use requests. The commission will sit like a court, hence the term quasi-judicial, reviewing the facts presented at the hearing, applying the adopted rules as explained by staff in the staff report and verbally. Commission members can make site visits but must disclose the evidence upon which they intend to rely from that visit. Commission members must disclose at the beginning of the hearing whether they have had communications with individuals on behalf of the applicant or otherwise, including who the communication was with and what the topic of the discussion was. All persons intending to speak to the commission will be sworn by the clerk. The staff will make a presentation. The commission may ask questions. The applicant will make a presentation, including expert witnesses, if any. Commission may ask questions. When the public hearing is open, the public can make comments on the application limited to 2 minutes each. Citizen testimony must be fact-based, not opinion. Commission may ask questions, and the applicant's attorney, if any, may ask questions considered cross-examination. Members of the public can decline to be cross-examined. Commission deliberates based upon the evidence presented. Commission's decision must be based on competent, substantial evidence, meaning based on the record, staff presentations, expert presentations, and fact-based comments by citizens according to the standards for approval set forth in the city code. And then the commission may approve, deny, or continue the item. So at this point, before staff makes its presentation, we should ask commission members, and you don't have to go through each one, if there are any disclosures related to conversations that might have been held with applicants or other persons.
Of course, commission members, anyone had any discussions or communications with the applicants for this issue? Please speak up now, let us know.
No.
None? All right, there are no,
Thank you.
there's no one or board members that have had discussion on this item. Let the record show, by the way, that we now have Commissioner Blimmer has joined our meeting. Good evening. Counselor, right. Right, at this point, this is quasi-judicial, so anyone that will be addressing this, including staff that will be doing the presentation, please stand and for the swearing in on this item. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony and evidence you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Thank you very much. Staff, you may proceed. Ms. Love, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, for the record, Debbie Love, City Planner, Community Planning and Development. The item before you is a request to extend the SDTOD. You did this for the applicant in July for other parcels. They have come back to add a couple of additional parcels that was unintentionally left out when they did the first round. The two parcels that they total 2.4 acres. And as you can see, one has an address, one is a vacant lot. It sits at the corner of, oh my goodness gracious, I'm losing my train of thought, my apologies, at 144th and 20th Lane. And the request is to add these also into the SDTOD. After tonight, if you, what we'll do is it will go before City Council. We anticipate this to be at their January hearing. We just don't know at this time which one it will be, because they may be changing some dates in January. And then it will come back for second reading. And the future land use map amendment will become effective 31 days after council adopts it at second reading. And the same goes for the second PowerPoint, and that's the zoning map change. So I'm assuming you don't need me to repeat
Okay.
the same information, but that was to be the zoning map change.
No changes were made to the map prior to this after the first ordinance passed that on that overlay. When that overlay was approved and this was left out, was action taken to make the changes on the map? Or
Yes, sir. The The folks who manage our code and map changes, they recently completed that, so our updated maps will show all of that. The maps you have in your package it was not updated because we
Right.
just completed that update.
Okay,
So the new maps and the maps that the consultant they have incorporated those into it.
okay. So once this passes, though, there is a certain amount of time before that can get out to be changed?
Yes, sir. We can't do anything for 31 days after it's adopted at
And
second
the
reading.
petitioner is aware of that, correct?
Yes, they know that.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay, very good. I don't have any other questions to staff. At this point, I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. Public hearing is now open for item 1766, and I'm also going to open it up for item 1767.
The applicant's agent is here to answer any
Very good.
questions that you may have.
Good evening. Happy belated Thanksgiving and pre-holiday Christmas and Hanukkah and other holiday seasons. Michael Pizzi, 6625 Miami Lakes Drive, and I'm the attorney for the Michael Deser family, for the Deser family that owns Deserland Park, and I'm the lawyer for the Desers, and they're the applicant. I think the planner, as usual, got it correct. This received unanimous approval from this body and from the City Commission with the final reading on September 27. So this application was approved unanimously by this board, and thank you. And it was approved at two hearings unanimously with full support and no objections from anybody. Not a single objector, unanimous City Commission approval at two public hearings. What happened was, due to, I would say, a Scribner's error, two folio numbers were inadvertently left off the application, and we had, so we went forward with the three folio numbers, but two folio numbers at the end of the property were left off the application, and we had wanted to maybe correct it as a Scribner's error and just add the two folio numbers in front of the commission. But being better safe than sorry, and to make sure there were no problems, we actually went ahead and went through the time and effort and expense to submit an entirely new application to add the folio numbers that were left off. So we actually have come back with an entirely new application simply to add the additional two folio numbers that were left off when we did the original application. So whatever we said previously, we'll say ditto. I did want to thank Ms. Love and Derek and the manager and all of you for your time and effort to make sure there's good planning in the great city of North Miami. And obviously, as has been said previously, I think the reason this received unanimous approval through three public hearings with no one raising any issues is because the city created these special districts so that you could take parcels of land that may be underutilized or may be only limited to a certain purpose. The whole purpose of these special districts is, in some of these big warehouse districts, where you may have a big warehouse that's 1 block or 2 blocks long, that's kind of limited in what you could do. If somebody there may be opportunities. It simply creates an opportunity to create mixed use, to create housing, which is desperately needed, and maybe create some mixed use and some retail, and create jobs. So these special districts simply provide an opportunity to provide some housing which is needed in the city, and also provide some mixed use that could create jobs. And also it's designed to promote neighborhoods where if you could live, work, and play in the same area, it lessens traffic congestion, lessens urban sprawl. So it simply provides an opportunity for development in partnership and in conjunction with the city that hopefully will be good for the city, good for your tax base, and smart growth. And again, we're simply adding two folios that were inadvertently left off, and I think the staff has said that. And we want to thank you for the opportunity to be here, and we're honored to be here, and we appreciate your efforts, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Pizzi. Any questions to the petitioner at this time from the board? None? All right, I'm going to go ahead and open up the public hearing. Anyone wishing to address this item, please come forth. Public hearing is now open. Seeing no one responding, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. Public hearing is now closed. Commission discussion?
I I understand, from what I understand, this is simply more of a, I hate to use the word, and I probably am using the wrong word, sort of like a clerical error where they should know. Okay, Debbie's
No.
shaking, okay, wrong word. I thought it would be the wrong word. So tell me what the right word is, that administratively, evidently, they left off these two parcels in the original application.
Correct.
Okay?
So we're just correcting
They're
a,
coming back to fix something that they
Right.
left off of their application
Well-
inadvertently, and they came back and applied to bring the two in that they had originally intended to include in the application.
Right.
Alright.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question?
yes,
So, Debbie, the depiction of the properties involved, did that change, or did that also add additional in the visual display of what properties, what the subject properties were? Did that change? Okay, so we're adding folio numbers.
From what they originally presented before the board,
Right.
they did a presentation. Has anything changed from the depiction of the properties that were involved in that original presentation?
All the properties that were in the original are the properties they had applied for. What you see today are the properties that they have now applied for, that they had originally intended to include. That they originally intended to include, but had inadvertently left off.
Right, but is it,
There-
has the footprint changed? Or is
Yes.
it just a legal description?
No, it's adding an additional 2.24 acres to the
right,
SDTOD.
it's an addition.
Mhm.
Nothing was altered as far as the original footprint that was presented to us. I
No,
think
sir.
that's what you were looking for, correct, sir?
No, what I'm looking for is what was presented to the board, the depiction of the properties that are involved in that original depiction, has that changed based on these additional?
Yes,
folio
because it's a
Yeah.
different application.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
They had only
So they're-
applied
So
for.
they're adding more property
Correct,
to
sir.
the request?
Yes, they had
Right.
originally intended to have more parcels included, but their application
Did not reflect?
did not reflect that.
Okay.
So
Is
that's
there-
all we could put forward is what they had applied
is there
for.
a photo of this? Debbie, is there a photo
I
of?
believe we saw
the-
that.
Is there a photo that shows how these two parcels are incorporated now in a larger scope? In other words, we
No,
had the
because you
picture
don't
of
have
the
a map amendment yet. So all I
Pardon?
can show, no, all I can show you are the subject properties. You won't see
Yeah.
anything incorporated yet until it actually gets adopted.
So Debbie, remind me, I think
Yes, sir.
originally when they came before the board, it was just for the warehouse area where they're using it for, I think, parties and whatnot, right?
Right, there were 3 parcels
Right.
originally.
Originally, yeah.
And so now they've come back and added 2 additional parcels.
Which are the ones across the street and behind?
Right, yes,
Okay.
sir. Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, very good. Any other questions?
I'd like to make a motion.
All right, we have a motion
No, I
on the,
have several questions.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
yes, sir, go ahead, Dr. Medina.
So, how high they can go there?
They can go 200 feet because it's it's the Special Development and Transit-Oriented District. They
So-
can go to 200 feet and 150 dwelling units per acre.
So, if I'm reading this map correctly, the entrance will be where the Chase is, which is a very small road, and where the Lexus is. And at this point, there have been 2 train accidents right there. It's a very small road. That's the only 2 roads to access these lots. So I have concerns about that. And right now, the traffic get back up on Biscayne coming from the north. And, there is a problem that people are actually on Biscayne to make a right there. So when we add these things, so we need either more roads or this is gonna be a problem.
When they come back for an actual development application, they will have to make sure they're meeting all of the code requirements. Right now, this is just giving
It's
them
just
the
the,
opportunity to come back at some point and apply.
Yeah, I just want to mention it for,
Right.
Thank you, sir.
for the
Thank
future.
you, thank you, Doctor. Okay, Mr. McDermott, you'd like to make a motion, sir?
Yeah, I'd like to move that we approve the item.
Mr. McDermott has moved to approve the item, seconded by Dr. Medina. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
All right, so this is two votes. We're first voting on PC 17-66.
Correct, this was PC
Yeah,
1766.
the motion is for PC
1766, no, 66. PC 1766 first. That was your first motion, sir.
Right.
All right, and then I'll entertain a motion for item 1767,
So moved.
moved by,
Seconded.
okay.
I'm
Mr.
sorry.
McDermott has made a motion to approve 17-67, seconded by Commissioner Edwards. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none? No?
What do we get? You have a question?
Here.
Thank you. Have a nice and safe holiday season, and
You as well.
God bless and be safe. Thank you very
Very
much.
As
good.
well.
Thank you very much.
You're
God
welcome.
bless. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Both items have moved and will go forward to the city commission. When is that scheduled?
As I said, I won't know yet until they settle what their meeting dates will be in January, and
Right.
then we'll move it forward to the first opportunity.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
There's a
Thank you.
question. Hold on.
Madam
So
Secretary?
sorry. 1766, who made the motion? I couldn't
Yes,
see.
the motion was made by Mr. McDermott. Both motions were made by Mr. McDermott. First was seconded by Dr. Medina.
Perfect.
The second item was seconded by Mr. Edwards.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Mr. Clark. Thank you. All right, moving on then. The next item is not quasi-judicial. Is that correct, staff? So
That is correct, sir.
I keep on track of everything.
Um,
The next item is PC 17-68. This is an ordinance of the mayor and the city council of the city of North Miami, Florida, amending the city's 2015 comprehensive plan by adopting the 2022. I have a split page. Bear with me one moment. I'd like to begin again. Sorry about that. I apologize. An ordinance of the mayor and city council of the city of North Miami, Florida, amending the city's 2015 comprehensive plan by adopting the 2022 evaluation and appraisal review, better known as the EAR, based comprehensive plan amendments, providing for transmittal, repeal, conflicts, severability, correction of scrivener's errors, codification, and an effective date. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you know, this has been a bit of a big project that we've undertaken. Calvin Giordano is the consultant that was hired by mayor and council in March to work on our EAR-based comprehensive plan amendments. This is done every 7 years. The consultant is here. Her name is Sylvia Vargas. She was going to be presenting before you earlier, and we just couldn't get the dates. We had to cancel the date that she was going to appear. And she has brought members of her team with her. And we're going to get up her PowerPoint up onto the screen, if you'll give us just a moment, sir.
Certainly.
And she'll walk us through all the public outreach, an overview of the project itself, a overview of, as you requested, an overview of the changes. And in your package, you'll see an Excel spreadsheet that has all of the changes that were made, so that you can see the policy number. I gave you a brief summary of what was changed in that policy, And with that in mind, unless you have any questions for me, I'll turn it over to Ms. Vargas and her team.
No, as Ms. Love, as a matter of getting some clarification on our procedures,
Yes, sir.
the consultants will make their presentation, and then as I would brought up to you and staff, in order to address and allow the public input, I would like to be able to, once our presentation is done, go back to each element and begin with the first element and asking if there's any discussion on those items. We will open up a public hearing per item, per element, to allow public input. Once the issues are discussed for that particular element, we will then close the public hearing on that item and then move on to the next element that is in the plan. And I will allow anyone to address more than one element. If the same one person wants to address each element, but they must address the element as we bring it up, not go off on a tangent. If they're talking about one particular element, we will discuss the items in that element, and if there's any recommendations, the council will then vote on whether or not to pass that on to the commission. Everybody clear on that with the way we'll proceed with this?
Yes, sir.
All right. Good evening, Sylvia. I'm sorry. You may go ahead and begin.
Not at all. Thank you very much. Good evening, commissioners. And first of all, let me tell you how pleased we are to be here. This has been a short process in many ways, but also it seems like it's been long because there's been a lot of work that has been done. And we're pleased to be presenting this first draft, in essence, of
And
the plan.
could you give your name and address
course.
real quick for
Yes.
the record, please? Thank you.
My name is Sylvia Vargas, and I am a principal planner with Calvin Giordano and Associates. My firm was retained by the city to lead the update of the comprehensive plan through the evaluation and appraisal review process, which, as Ms. Love mentioned, occurs every 7 years by statutes. Not every city does this work necessarily every time. Some cities find that their plan is okay, even after 7 years, that not that many changes have occurred locally, or that their plan still meets the statutory requirements. In this case, there have been some changes in the statutes that have occurred since 2015, which is the last time that the plan was updated, at least the goals, objectives, and policies. Of course, you have been making amendments to the land use map, and you have adopted ordinances, but not through this evaluation and appraisal review process, which is sort of a comprehensive accounting of how well you have been as a city implementing your policies, right? So this is what we're doing. We're looking at the plan in a holistic way, and we are bringing it into alignment with the current Florida statutes, and trying to also bringing into alignment with the current conditions of the city. In 7 years, a lot can happen in a city of the size of North Miami. I work with a lot of different communities, some of them large, some of them small, very small, and they don't see a lot of change, but you all have in these 7 years. So with that said, I'm going to introduce my team members who are here tonight, and they're going to help me make this presentation. I have Eric Liff, who is with Lambert Advisory, and we have been partners in a lot of projects like this, and Eric has been looking at items related to the housing and economic development elements, we're calling it now economic development, but also has been shoring up our understanding of how the city is going to grow from the perspective of population and housing. And I also have Carla Evenbach sitting in the second row, who has her own consulting firm, and she has joined our team to help us with issues related to sustainability, climate change, and environmental protection. She's been doing a lot more than that, but you know. They both have, actually. So they will be taking up some parts of the presentation because we have a long presentation. I'm sorry for you, but we do have a lot of material, so I'm going to jump right into it. So the first thing that you may notice is that we're calling this the Future City Comprehensive Plan. It's Future City with a tagline that reads, "Know Me Beyond the Centennial." And the reason why we have branded it this way is because in thinking about where the city stands today, you have a centennial coming up. There's 2 centennials that the city has, but the first one is coming in 2026, and that's the incorporation of the town. And in thinking about the first 100 years and everything that the city has accomplished, and then thinking about the things that the city wants to accomplish, you already have a framework for a lot of that in the current comprehensive plan, but where are we going to take it over the next 100 years? So that's kind of where it comes from, sort of trying to balance a view to the past and a view to the future. And I have to credit Councilwoman Timothée giving me a lot of the ideas that went into this branding, which I think is very fair for a future city. One that envisions the city of North Miami as being a model for the region in terms of sustainability, resilience, equity, innovation, functionality, and essentially all the things that contribute to a superior quality of life for a city. So there were multiple goals that the city set for the comprehensive plan as far as when we pursued the original RFP that attracted us to this project, and that included these different factors that we hope to infuse in the final version of the comprehensive plan to make it a plan for this century, one that is user-friendly, that is easy to understand, easy to navigate, is visually compelling with graphics, and accessible to all audiences, oriented towards systems, looking at the priorities the city has set, and actionable. So you will maybe wonder, in having, I hope, had a chance to review the documents that have been provided to you, that document doesn't look very graphically compelling. It's kind of drab and boring, like, you know, the documents tend to be sometimes. And the reason is because we're not there yet. We're not at this point yet. We are doing the revisions to the plan in the way that the state agency and the other agencies that review the amendments like to see it. Just a strike through and underline format with the things that you're deleting in strike through and the things that you're adding in underline. So we're not at the point where we are doing that formatting, but it's coming, so you will see it. Our process is very simple. It started around April, I'm going to say, after we got our notice to proceed. It's just 4 phases, and some of them have been happening sort of concurrently. It's kind of a compressed timeline because usually this process takes about a year, and we haven't had a year, but we're okay. So our mobilization was April and May. We had conversations with many of you and with the elected officials and other groups to get a sense of what the city is thinking in terms of priorities, and many of you gave us a lot of good input at the beginning of that process. At the same time, we started with our collection of data for our analysis of existing conditions and trends. And I would like to say that we have closed that process, but every day we still find new things. So to to say that it's completely finished, I'm going to say that it is, but we're still tweaking a few things here and there. We have also completed the, almost completed the process of assembling the building blocks for the comprehensive plan, which are the elements, as you know. And we are still tweaking. We're still obviously taking input from you, from the public, and we'll be taking input from the council. So that's why that phase is not closed entirely. But we are already starting with this process, phase 4, which is the review, transmittal, and adoption process. And once this phase goes to the council and they hopefully adopt on first reading with whatever revisions they decide to incorporate, then we will submit this version of the plan to the reviewing agencies. And then the review takes about 60 days through what is called the state coordinated process. And they return whatever comments they have to us. And we expect that to be sometime in February, probably late February. And then to take the final version of the plan for adoption to the council maybe in March. We, while all of this has happened, have had a public engagement process that has consisted of 2 parallel tracks. One is what we have for our public, our in-person public engagement, which has consisted of us leveraging events that the city had already scheduled, large events where a lot of people had congregated, such as, for example, the Friday night jazz at Mocha, or the Gran Fiesta event. And we set up what we call pop-up outreach. So we had like a tent or a table or a booth, and we basically tried to bring people in to talk to us from the event. And that allowed us to talk to many people that normally perhaps would not even be aware of this process, and who gave us input through those means. We had several of those, as I mentioned, some of these events, large events that the city has organized, but also things like the gardening series at the Enchanted Forest Elaine Gordon Park. We also did National Public Lands Day at the same park. And in each occasion, we were at each event for several hours. We also have had a website dedicated to the project, open for a long time. This is where we have information related to the project, where we have had our schedule of events and activities. We have had some interactive ways for people to provide feedback, input to us. We have had a survey that was supposed to close back in October, but we still have it open, and we have still people completing the survey, and sort of I get, some of those trickling in every other day or so. And of course, there has been promotion through the city's social media platforms, the city's website, through flyers and other means, which include also things like using the e-sign Mocha, the NOMI TV channel, announcements at the city council meetings, palm cards. There have been 3,000 distributed, email blasts through the city's constant contact, and flyers and posters at several locations throughout city offices. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this, because this, like I mentioned, this survey is still open and we're still getting results. It's not a huge response that I would like, frankly, but we still count this input, obviously, and we are continuously updating as we go, as we get more. So far, we have had a good distribution of age in those survey takers. We have primarily people who own property, that have responded. We have a majority of respondents that have been in the eastern part of the city, as you can see, about 77% of those, and then about 17.5% in the central part of the city, not as many in the western part of the city. We also have a majority of people who classify themselves primarily as residents, but we also have some who maybe themselves or just as individual categories have also either consider themselves landowners or business owners or developers or other.
Oh, Sylvia,
Yes.
can you give me some idea of what might have contributed to the 3.5% in the western part of the city?
I
com-
cannot tell you, to be completely honest. I think that we need to probably do a little bit more targeted outreach in those areas now that we have some numbers that we have seen that are not where they need to be. But obviously, a survey, when it is conducted online, is audiences that are, self-selected. And, we have had a lot of people that have looked at the survey, and not everybody has chosen to take it. So it's not a very long survey. I would like to say that it's a simple survey to take. It probably takes you about 10 minutes. Since I'm here, and hopefully there are people behind me, and you all can be ambassadors, this survey is still open, and we're still taking it into consideration in the input that we have for the comprehensive plan. Yes.
The floor, the recognizes Ms. Blumer.
Hi.
You need to get you a microphone.
Good evening. I just have a few questions.
Sure.
First question, how many languages is the survey in?
The survey itself has only been in English.
That's part of the problem.
Okay,
So
that's
the-
fair.
Yeah,
Mhm.
the west part of the city would be highly populated with the Haitian Americans,
Okay.
which would require for the survey to be in Creole. And also possibly have individuals who are canvassing and who are actually asking the questions and reporting the answers.
Okay,
And second,
yes,
the city also has a growing population of Hispanics.
understood.
So the survey should
Yeah.
be in
I
Spanish
would
as
like
well.
to say that our contract includes translating the document into those languages. Unfortunately, it wasn't part of our initial contract to do translations of the other pieces. But the city can help us with that, because you do have your communications office that does this. And so we're going to leverage that. And we will do it.
How many months or days left?
We can close it whenever we need to. So we have left it open for an additional month and a half. We can leave it open until we finish the process.
Okay, so staff will work with them to do that? Yeah, I think that is very important. If you're putting
I
a
agree with
plan
you.
for 7
Mhm.
years, everyone should have an opportunity to take part.
I am completely in agreement with you.
Thank you.
Yes.
That my concern was that it wasn't addressed as soon as you saw that low number come in, and that's a pretty large size part of the population of the city.
Yes.
And during the process, I had hoped that would have caught someone's eye right away.
Yeah,
to
that may be
rectify
on
that.
me. As I have been working on multiple things at the same time, I have to be honest, I check on the survey, I get them. I get each one individually, but until not very long ago, because I have been waiting for the numbers to come in, I did not grab a report to see those numbers from the perspective, from the geographic perspective. This has been just in the last maybe couple of, not even, maybe like the last week or so, where I have downloaded the report as we were preparing for this. And should have done it earlier, but, unfortunately I had a, 200, 300 page document to also produce at the same time. That's no excuse. It's no excuse. But we'll work with the city to make sure that we correct that. So with that said, and because, yes.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Debbie, aren't we under a deadline to get this comprehensive plan approved?
Yes, Sylvia's going to speak to you about that.
Mhm.
Pardon?
Sylvia will speak to you all about that in her presentation.
And
Yes.
I can explain that right now, as a matter of fact, because I actually skipped over the milestones. Yes, the municipalities, once they submit, they have two deadlines. One is the deadline to submit a notification to the state that they are in fact going to do an evaluation and appraisal review of their comprehensive plan. Like I mentioned, sometimes the notification from a city to the state says, we're good, we're not going to do this time. We're going to skip over this cycle. But when a city determines that they are going to do a comprehensive plan update, then the notification is a little more substantive, and it tells the state, yes, we are ready, we have changes that we would like to make, we have changes that we need to make. And so you should expect to see an update from us within the statutory timeframes. And the statutory timeframe is that from the moment that the state acknowledges your letter, you have a year. Now, because of the little hiccup that we had with the quorum for the November meeting for this body, that the meeting was canceled, and because of that, subsequently the first reading was canceled. We knew that we were not going to be making our deadline, which was December 1st. So right now we're a few days late, but the moment that we knew that that planning commission meeting was going to cancel and that our process was going to be a little bit off track, we contacted the state agency, the EO, and we talked to them, and they assure us that there's no penalty. Basically, this is their deadline for, that they keep, but there's no penalty whatsoever for being a little late. We're not going to be months late. We're still intending to submit the first reading version no later than the end of this year, given the fact that we have the first reading next week and we need a few days to package together whatever revisions the council decides to make and to get the notices and to get everything into that package. I like to joke that there's no DEO police that is going to come to and knock the door down and take people to jail over this. And in fact, staff at DEO kind of laughed at me for saying that, but it's true. So I know of at least one community in Miami-Dade County that right now is a year and a half late in submitting their DEO, and nothing has happened to them. And we're certainly not going to be in even remotely that category.
But
So-
your target is to submit this new comprehensive plan by the end of December.
We are submitting the first reading version by that's the target, yes. I would prefer not to delay longer than that. With that said, however, with respect to the survey, we can continue to take input because we have already seen the patterns of priorities. I suspect that a lot of people care about the same things in the city, sort of globally, right? I mean, obviously, different neighborhoods have different needs, but in terms of the sort of high-level policy issues that we're addressing here, I suspect that we're going to see a lot of, sort of the same themes coming through. And we'll take it, we'll add it, because those things go into addenda that we put into the document, and they're not part of the required elements, right? So what I would like to do, I have a slide on the screen and I have a couple more slides, but given this feedback, which is really good and I appreciate it, I think I'm going to skip over this because I would like to maybe come back and give you a better picture once we have more numbers. And yes. Yeah. Well, I can tell you this. I can tell you first of all the questions that we asked. How's that? So let me go first to that. So one of the first two questions in the first section that we asked, other than the demographics, had to do with whether people thought that on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being worse and 5 being better, whether they felt like the city was growing worse or growing better. And in the numbers that we have so far, we have sort of a split between people who see it as getting better and people who see it getting worse. But also a lot of people are sort of sitting on the fence, kind of waiting to determine whether it is better or worse. We also had another sort of version of this question, which asked people, how would you rate the quality of life in North Miami today? And there, the vast majority of people, I would say it's over 70% of people, said that the quality of life in North Miami is either good or excellent. We also asked then, the other questions were, oh my goodness, even I can't see this. We had a list of a list of items that speak to potentially a list of potential needs for the city in terms of infrastructure or parks and a lot of other things. And we asked them what they thought the most urgent needs were, and they could choose up to 3 of those. And in this question, the vast majority of the respondents so far have said infrastructure is their priority. So I can tell you that. And then the final question in that section was about, actually there's 2 more. One is, we have 4 themes that run through this comprehensive plan update. We have community health and wellness. We have technology, infrastructure, and access. We have housing affordability, and we have environmental protection and climate change response. And we asked people which of those they thought was the top priority. And in this one, the vast majority, by a lot, picked environmental protection and climate change response as their top priority. And finally, if I can read my own slide here, let me see if I can read it here. Debbie, this is not the final that I sent later today, but it's okay. We had a list of actions that, potential actions that the city could take to make this, the public realm better. And in this area, the vast majority of people chose
Sidewalks.
Yes. That's right, sidewalks. That's that blue bar that you see there. So I said I wasn't really going to give you that, but I've given you the the responses. And I also have, just a very small sample of some of the comments that we got, both from the online form, not the survey, but there's a form where people can send us their comment, and I would urge anyone to go and look at the elements and provide us with feedback through that form, but also through the events that we went to. And they said things, like, I love the diversity of the city. I love the big public spaces that we have, such as the Mocha Plaza. But then we also heard about, our single-family neighborhoods need protection from encroachment, from the other more, intense districts that have height and that have density. We need affordable housing, specifically somebody mentioned for public school teachers. Somebody said, well, you know, we have a lot of wonderful community groups here. They need to be engaged by the city and the different initiatives. You know, they need to leverage those groups better. We heard that, you know, the city needs to require developers to set aside more green space. Green space and parks was something that we heard a lot about in different conversations. I think that Carla and I did a lot of the public engagement, and we heard a lot about, you know, we need to do more with our park system. We need to get more from development. And a lot of people talked about infrastructure and the transportation system. So I've already talked about the major themes. Not going to get into each one of them necessarily at this point, but I will just say that your current comprehensive plan already has a foundation for these themes. But we have now having them as priorities set by the city, we have sought to really elevate them and weave them through all of the elements to make sure that they come through in a very cohesive way. So you will see, for example, that we have a new element that is community health and wellness, but at the same time, we talk about community health in other elements. We talk about housing affordability in the housing element, but we also talk about ways to make housing more affordable through the land use pattern, the development pattern in the future land use element. We talk about transportation that helps to reduce the cost to people, to households that are burdened, and so on and so on and so on.
I have a question.
Yes.
You talked about I guess the 5 questions and the responses.
Yes.
Seeing that you have this sheet where it shows the percentage of responses, I guess based on community or however you split the city into 3 sections.
Yes.
Is there any way to see what the responses were per those sections?
We can do that. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That'd be an interest to see because I'm pretty sure
Sure.
the priorities, depending on where you are within the city, may fluctuate.
I would imagine that's true. Yes. Although, you know, again, the vast majority right now are respondents from that sort
Correct.
of east side of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
city. We had some people. We had some other questions that asked about. You know, does your street flood when it rains? Do you have trees on your street? It varied. You know, there were some people that said, "Yeah, my street floods every time it rains," or people that said only occasionally. But because we did not want to do a survey that was very burdensome on people to take. We didn't ask a lot of personal information, so we used zip codes just as a sort of general guide. We didn't ask, well, what subdivision do you live in or anything like that.
Yeah. Okay.
But we can break it down that way for sure. I believe that we can. Yes.
And then the last question, you said that you could see that a lot of people have seen the survey.
Yes.
Is there a way to quantify what area those are, or no?
No,
You can just-
because
Okay.
unless they answer the question,
No, no.
unfortunately, no.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
they're just visitors to the site,
The
and they
site.
just sort of look around and, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, I mentioned our second phase was our data collection and analysis, and there's a lot more than this behind our work, but I just wanted to highlight a few of the things that we have sort of used as factors for our foundation. So obviously in creating a policy for land use, we need to know what the population is today, what the population is going to be in the future, how much housing that population is going to need, what type of housing is going to be needed, and what kinds of services are going to be needed. And those kinds of things have a way of being influenced by the age of the population, the household size, the income, and other characteristics of households, right? So we did a lot of that work. I'm not going to necessarily go through each one of these numbers. You can review them at your leisure. You have them in front of you in the printout. But I will tell you that one of the things that we did notice is that the rate of growth over the last few years before, I would say maybe a couple of years ago, Debbie, correct me if I'm wrong, has been pretty low for the city before, yeah, for a decade, perhaps. And yeah, am I correct? Of less than a 0.25% on a yearly basis growth. Now, growth is still growth. It's not that the city is not growing, but it has been a relatively flat and very sort of slow growth. That has changed. That has been changing. You all, I'm sure, have been seeing all the development applications that have been coming through with, 200 units or, however many, each one of those. Those are in the pipeline. Those units, if they get built, will mean additional population for the city. When those are going to happen, we can't necessarily tell right now. Obviously, the developers have a phasing plan and, they have, needs that have to do with financing, et cetera. So you would imagine that for development that has already been approved, you may be looking at the next 5 years, perhaps, if market conditions are okay. We're then sort of trying to figure out, okay, the city has not been growing a lot for a long time, but now in the last couple of years, we're seeing this shift. Is it enough for us to say this is the trend? And so we're going to skip over that sort of linear growth that is very flat, and I'm gonna jump over, if I may, to this, and Eric is gonna talk a lot about this, but you see 4 curves here, and they represent different growth scenarios that we have looked at. And the 0.24% per year is that blue line at the bottom, very flat, very low. You can see how low it is. So we could go with that, but is it realistic? And even if it is realistic, is that really what the city wants? Obviously, you have a comprehensive plan that has already in place a lot of policies that say otherwise, because you have these overlays that have incentive bonuses for density that, give you additional height, and all of these other policies that talk about revitalizing certain parts of the city, redeveloping certain parts of the city, and growing. Basically, this comprehensive plan that you have in place today is a plan that is about growth already. So based on that, we kind of started saying, okay, we know that that has been the trend in the past, but it's really a policy choice. How much does the city want to grow? And then you put in place the policies to make it happen, right? Obviously, there are a lot of factors out there that may shift the equation, but once you put the policies in place, at least you have that framework to work off of. So I'm going to go back for a second here and just say that that's kind of what we're working with in terms of population, like, moving forward. And we'll get into the projections in a moment. But I wanted to point out that there's been some trends that we believe are going to continue that are significant and that have an influence on the comprehensive plan. For instance, the median age has been going up. It has been going up for a number of years and is now at 37.5. That's the median. But we also see that the share of population that is over 65 is also going up. So that pyramid, that population pyramid is shifting, right? It's getting wider at the top. And that represents changes that you have to take into consideration in terms of services that you're going to be provided for an older population, transportation, health, the ability to walk places that are close to you, that you don't have to get in a car, etc. So these are the kinds of things that we're looking at from the perspective of our technology, infrastructure, and access theme. For example, we looked at, how many households or what percentage of households in North Miami have a computer or access to a computer. And that's according to the American Community Survey 5-year estimate for 2016 to 2020. It's 92.5%. And then households with broadband internet is 73.6, which is somewhat low, actually. We know a lot of these sort of accessibility issues to technology became starkly clear during the pandemic. And the city already has a strategy in place for technological advancement of infrastructure. And so we are sort of trying to memorialize that in the comprehensive plan and actually putting forward additional policies to make it equitable, to make it accessible to all. All right, so now we get into the land use foundation. I talked a little bit about this already. You know, we looked at the population today and as it's going to grow over the next 22 years. By the way, I didn't mention our horizon is 2045. That's what we're looking at. And then, you know, based on the population and sort of based on a median household size, we calculated the number of units. And then we looked at the future land use pattern and said, well, how much land do we have in each of these categories, and what's the density that can be developed on those categories? And we calculated how many units that land, as it's today, could support. And so based on that, then we started looking at your floating unit pool that you have as a tool in your comprehensive plan. And we looked at the infrastructure needs. So I'm going to skip over these two. We already looked at this. I'm going to stand down for a second and let Eric speak to the population projections, and I'll see you in a minute.
Thank you, Eric Liff, a principal at Lambert Advisory. We were engaged by CGA to
Eric, give your
assist
name and address again
that-
for us, please.
Eric Liff, Lambert Advisory, 100 Biscayne Boulevard.
Thank you.
Actually a resident of North Miami as well.
Thank you.
And so we were engaged by CGA to assist with the economic, demographic, housing, and economic development components of the plan. To go through this very quickly, we're going to start with the population. And as Sylvia had mentioned, you know, it's a very difficult process to do long-term projections, particularly for a population. And as it indicated before, you know, in the 90s, there were several thousand households added to the city. And between 2000 and 2020, there was marginal growth, a couple hundred households. Obviously now we're seeing that begin to change as development opens up, and there's tremendous interest from the development community and opportunities for them to build, particular kind of higher density development. So the outlook is beginning to change. And so what I'm going to do very quickly here, if that's okay, because there's a lot of material to go through, is just talk about the projections. And as Sylvia had mentioned, you can see you got to have a foundation and a basis for making projections. And you use historical data such as census, and then going forward, we look at historical trends. We also use resources such as the Transportation Planning Organization, the TPO, the county, which does the long-term projections by traffic area zone. And so we'll look at these projections, and actually in this case, using the TPO numbers, they're projecting 1.02% average annual growth between 2015 and 2045. And so, you can see in this, we apply kind of different measures. Let me just, which we'll get to in a minute and what those mean. But we start, you need to look at this and start to understand, you make forecasts on, a moderate growth or a more aggressive growth, and all of that which we consider. We also look at the state's EDR numbers and the way they've forecasted population. You can see in this case, they've got about 8,600 new residents planned, or forecasted between 2023 and 2045. About half of that of the TPO. So you can see how confusing and how challenging this can be. But we take all of this in consideration. We'll start to make these projections and then kind of base it again, like Sylvia said, kind of as the cities, the opportunity for city to provide input as to how quickly they want to grow. And again, it's the policy choices. Do you want to grow a current ratio with the county at 2.2% of population and carry that forward? Do you want to be a little more aggressive? And again, opening up the opportunities for development in terms of density. And so these are decisions that need to be made. We'll just help kind of lay that foundation out for that growth and for the city and its community to make those decisions on its own. And so the bottom line is, if we took the TPO's projections and at 1.02% per year, there's forecast to be an additional 16,900 residents within the city by 2045, or approximately 7,350 total households. And that becomes your housing demand and your forecast based upon the TPO. As Sylvia had mentioned, then we looked at, if you moderated the growth, because if we said it was, at 20% of that growth, you're talking about, population, about households of about 6,100 households. If you want to have a little more aggressive growth pattern, then you're looking at about a 1.25% annual growth rate, and it creates about 8,700 units demanded, or households demanded in housing units within the city. So again, you can see where we kind of, use all of these resources to kind of determine and help determine where we want to be in terms of growth, and convert that into housing units. And so, as Sylvia noted, that one of the tools used is to kind of provide that inventory of housing is to use a floating unit pool. The benefits of it, you can pace the development, and it can be directed into priority areas, which we're going to get into in these districts and the overlays. It helps you kind of plan between capital improvements and funding, as you can, because things will fluctuate, timing and development fluctuates. You use these floating unit pools to help to kind of gauge or redistribute some funding if necessary, and kind of based upon capital improving plans over the long term. It doesn't necessarily match the market, because obviously development is not linear. It happens in spurts, so you can actually control how you want to distribute some of the housing units if that's needed and called for. And again, it's the kind of the city's decision as to how it wants to grow. Again, looking at the floating unit pools, in this case, there's been, it's been allocated through different district overlays. I'll let Sylvia kind of talk about the historical inventory versus what's been used.
Okay. Thanks, Eric. When Eric mentioned that the floating unit pool has been a pretty effective growth management tool that the city has used, right? So not only to pace the growth by allocating it through, a pretty complicated process that you all are very familiar with, but also by directing it to specific areas through allocations, right? So you have currently a neighborhood redevelopment overlay that has an allocation, or has had an allocation, of 2,500 units. And then outside of the NRO, as it's called, another 2,500 units. And Eric mentioned sometimes the demand of the market doesn't match, the preference that the city has. So that's what's happened in recent times with respect to the floating pool, because of those 2,500 units that were allocated to within the NRO, and then the other 2,500 to outside of the NRO, there was perhaps an expectation that within the NRO there was going to be a little bit more demand, but it hasn't really occurred at the same pace as the demand outside of the NRO. So the pool outside of the NRO was depleted. In fact, we're in the red right now, about 300 something units, whereas within the NRO, there's still about 1,200 units left. This number is a little out of date. It changes every day.
After you combine them. It's
After you
1,200.
combine them.
Mhm.
Okay. Then there is also the Regional Activity Center, which has its own pool. It's fixed, and it's allocated to between the PCUD, which is Solemia, and that has 5,000 units, and the SDTOD, which has 2,000 units. There's still some units left to allocate in that district. But because of this sort of mismatch between the different pools, the ones that are flexible, the city found itself wondering, well, what do we do? I mean, we don't have any units here, but we want growth to happen here, and we have a lot of units here, but we can't move them right now. So recently, the city, as you're probably aware, took action to consolidate the pools. And by doing that, it gives itself flexibility. Instead of saying, well, this one goes here and this one goes there, now the pools are combined. So that's the first part. But then the second part of it is we still need to replenish the pool, because we're not going to have enough units in that pool to take us through the end of the planning horizon, 2045. So as Eric mentioned, we have several different growth scenarios. We are not making a decision about that. The city has to make the decision. Ultimately, it's a policy question. And of course, projections are just that, projections, obviously. They're not, numbers that are set in stone, but, at least they're targets, right? So the city has to decide. But for our purposes, for our planning purposes, we need to pick a number that will allow us to plan for housing needs and infrastructure. And so in an effort to be safe, have a margin, it's better to be able to pull back rather than finding that you have a gap in those areas. So we picked the high growth scenario as our baseline for allocating units to the pool and for estimating infrastructure needs. That doesn't mean that the city is going to grow at that pace or at that much, but that's how we're planning. It could be that the city is not going to grow to that extent well beyond the horizon of this plan. So here we're talking about, in essence, 22 years, 2045, right? But it could be that, the city will not reach this high growth population until 2060. But again, for refilling the pool and for planning for infrastructure, that high growth is the number that we picked at this point. So we are calculating that based on the projected population of the high growth scenario, we are recommending to put about 8,700 units into the pool. And that's a little more than the pool had the last time, which was 5,000. But what that will do is that the city hopefully will not necessarily have to keep going back to amending the comprehensive plan if it runs out, and especially now that it's going to have more flexibility because the pool is consolidated. Now, this is just a couple of images that show you, first, in this map, the base land use categories as they exist today. So you have yellow is single family, and you have, sort of a darker yellow that is medium density residential, and another type of yellow that is low medium density residential. You have, some red on the map, that's your mixed use high. I'm not going to go through all of them, but each color represents a different density, a different land use pattern. In addition to these base categories, the city today has a number of overlays, and the overlays act to provide another layer of regulation on top of the base layer. So if you have an area that is, I don't know, just for the sake, I'm not even going with your actual categories, but say you have a commercial corridor, but you have an overlay here that is a mixed use overlay, and the base layer has no residential density, but your mixed use overlay says, yeah, no, you know what? If you go with the overlay, you could get residential here at a density of X, right? That's how the overlays act. And there's quite a few of them. You're familiar with them, so I'm not necessarily going to try and instruct you on those. But I will just say that as we looked at these, what caught our eye was the NRO. We have mentioned that already as being one of the overlays that had that pool allocated to it, where there was not as much demand happening for units. And one of the reasons we caught on to that, let me go here, is that that overlay actually is overlapping with another number of things. In some of the areas that you see in purple, where there's nothing beneath except for the purple, there's actually other land uses. There are commercial corridors, there's downtown, there are community facilities, and those areas already have other overlays that are higher intensity, that are more attractive to developers. But in the areas that you see that are looking sort of pinkish in this graphic is because there's yellow underneath the purple, and the yellow is single family. Those are single family neighborhoods that have this overlay that would allow today under that overlay for redevelopment of land in those areas at higher densities of up to 90 units per acre. And it's really not attractive, first of all, for the neighborhood, because you don't want encroachment into your neighborhood of high density, but also because for a developer to do a project in those areas, they have to go and buy a lot of individual lots. That's really not practical, right? And so as we started looking at this particular overlay, which is a big area, by the way, we thought, is this really effective? And is it really even necessary? Because of what's happening underneath and because of the other overlays that are doing other and more effective work. And so one, perhaps the single most significant change that we're making in terms of the land use pattern is a recommendation to eliminate this overlay. We don't believe it's necessary. We don't believe it's necessary functionally, and we don't believe it's necessary in terms of providing density that is needed. And I'm going to show you in a moment. Let me see if I'm here. With the NRO, we have these calculations. I'm not going to necessarily ask you to look at this and read this table, but as part of our analysis, we have taken the acreage of every single one of these land use categories, both the base and the overlays, and calculated how many units they could accommodate. So, you know, you look at that capacity, you deduct what is existing, and you also calculate the population that is based on those units, right? Right now, with the NRO and with all the other overlays, the city could grow to about 359,000 plus people in some unknown period at an annual absorption rate, which Eric has calculated based on development that has been happening over the years, of about 300 to 400 units per year. Let's say, for the sake of, right? Let's pick 400 to be conservative. The city with this pattern has about 255 years of growth potential. That's a lot. None of us are going to be, well, who knows, but I know I'm not going to be around when that happens. So with the recommendation, you know, we were asked, is that going to hurt us if we take the NRO out? So we did the calculation again. Here's our map without the NRO. We did the calculation. Oh, let me go to the calculation first. And basically, the difference is still minimal because even without that overlay, you're going to have over 216 years worth of growth. So we think that it's the right move to eliminate that overlay at this time. You have more than enough capacity. We also think that for the past few years, the city has sort of focused on the growth and redevelopment of the regional activity center, the overlays that are in that area with the allocations, Solemia and the special development transit-oriented overlay district, which you heard an application just today. And in this next cycle, we need to shift our focus a little more to these other overlays that have been a little more neglected. The PCDs and the North Miami Transit Station Overlay District. So those are going to be sort of the focus area for our policies. And let me just go back here and mention that, you know, you had a map in your package that reflected the elimination of the NRO, but there have been some amendments that were made in October and in November. We have made these changes now and have added, so the next iteration of the map is reflecting this, and what we would like you to do today is to make the recommendation on this new map, not on the one that is in your package. There's another item that has just come up in the last day or two, which is a request from the public through the public input form for the neighborhood. You can remind me what it's called, but is it Arch Creek? This is the area?
It's in the Arch Creek, but it's along Emerald Drive.
Yeah, along Emerald Drive. The land use designation of this area is the same as uses around it that are not residential, right? Even though this row that you see outlined in this map, that's a residential use. It's not single family. It's not multifamily. I think that the majority of those structures are duplex structures. But we have been requested to look at that area and to consider whether it is appropriate to extend the land use designation that is to the northeast and also to the southwest, which is high density residential. And it makes sense because right now the designation is for community facilities university. And obviously that's not a university use, it's not a community facilities use, it's private property used for residential. So we are entertaining that request, and you can discuss whether you want to recommend that the council consider it. Yes.
One of the questions on that, how is that affecting the zoning that it is now? In other words, it's zoned, if I'm not correct, it's residential multifamily or just residential single family?
No, sir, neither. It's actually community facility university because it was part of the extension area for Johnson and Wells. And the zoning is public use. So these dwelling units can't do anything. And now that we have modified.
Or are they considered non-conforming?
They're non-conforming, but they can't they can't have addition, they can't do anything to the property.
Right.
They can replace what they have, but they can't do anything else.
So what this would be doing is actually correcting what essentially is an erroneous designation
Yes.
for these uses.
It'll actually make them conforming.
Right.
Does
So
that make
they
sense?
basically are surrounded by a higher density, and this one little area is just like landlocked, basically.
Right,
Or
it's
development locked, I should say.
correct. It's a leftover from Johnson and Wales.
Right.
And when we made the extensions of the transit station, transit station overlay,
Mhm.
this is the only little area left that is still
University.
university outside of what is Mater Academy.
Yeah.
That
I
will
think the
stay.
thinking at one time, because I remember when this came up, was that that was going to be helpful in allowing student housing
That's correct, sir.
in that area. And that's why that designation
And
was
they do have a
moved,
student housing at the end of that street,
which
They-
is no
yeah.
longer,
which
And
is
it-
no longer student housing.
Student
No, it's
housing.
actually multifamily, so
right,
Well, it just makes
apartments. So
sense,
this
yeah.
will now make that whole area match what is, as Sylvia
Right.
said, to the, surrounded by
right.
Yeah, it-
multifamily uses, and they're the ones stuck in the middle now with,
Right.
they,
It just makes sense to make it uniform.
Right.
yes, and
Mm-hmm.
like I said, it's the only properties left from the former Johnson and Wells campus and the campus extension area that is inappropriate and doesn't allow any development at all, other than what they have now on the ground.
Right.
Sorry.
I had a question.
Yes.
Is there any west side? Can you walk me through what's been projected for the west side of the city?
We don't have projections broken down that way.
Okay.
But the west side of the city has, the vast majority, as you can see, is yellow.
Yep.
Right? That means single-family residential districts that exist, neighborhoods that exist as such. We're not changing that pattern. So that means that what our focus has been for those areas, for the yellow areas, has been to protect them and to enhance them, to allow for, improvement of those neighborhoods and strengthening of those neighborhoods as single family. However, there are also, some corridors that, as you know, that are projected to become mixed-use corridors. So those we're not changing either. So again, I think the pattern of land use that the city established in the last comprehensive plan is thoughtful and is cogent with goals of growth and redevelopment and revitalization. We're not changing any of that at this point, with that one exception of the NRO.
Thank you.
And are you still advocating trying to fill in that, what we call the donut hole with the annexations?
Yes,
of
there are
align-
annexation policies in the future land use element, and certainly the city would be encouraged to continue looking at a strategy for filling in those holes if possible. It's tough, though. I'm doing some annexations in other communities, and it's a tough process.
Yeah, they voted it down before, not just a little vote, but a real hard vote, no?
Yeah.
But one of the things that I'm particularly pleased with the comp plan is the additional protections of the single-family neighborhoods. By removing the NRO, all of those residential lots are now going to would not be subject to
Not be
intrusion
developable.
and degradation.
Right.
So, CJA's we'll show you in a moment that there are some additional policies to further protect the single family from erosion.
So, gonna go now.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Yes.
The chair recognizes Dr. Medina.
So these, the Emerald Drive, going back to the Emerald Drive PU,
Yes.
so what we're doing is to change it to what, multi-use? What is your recommendation?
The idea would be that this will be redesignated as high-density residential, just like the use to the northwest, that area to the northwest, in yellow that you see in the map. I don't have a pointer, but,
No, but
yeah,
it's-
Debbie
it's-
has one. Is it working?
So this is behind the school, yeah,
Is it behind the school?
it's on the north of the school.
Batteries.
Mm-hmm.
This.
Yeah, it's one street.
This
So
is the
that's
one
where
street,
they
Emerald
slow
Drive.
by, at the end of the,
Yes, yeah, it bumps up right against the Slovak Club property.
that's
It
one,
it bumps up against, it's sort of sandwiched between the two bodies of water, right? And it's just a strip. And I believe it's a dead-end road.
no,
No? No, you're right. It goes around. It goes around. It's true. But it's just that area. And basically, we would be tying into what's adjacent to it, which is high-density residential. So that would be the recommendation.
what is high-density residential, how tall they can go?
It can go to 25 dwelling units per acre and 110 feet.
That's one of the most beautiful areas of the city.
This request is coming from that neighborhood group.
Yeah, the neighborhood itself made the request.
Is there land?
You can discuss it, you can consider it. We're recommending this to you, and you can decide whether it makes sense and you want to send it on to the commission, to the council.
Yes.
Yeah.
The
it,
chair
um,
recognizes Mr. McDermott.
Yeah, it just makes absolute sense to me. It's like one street that's like development locked, so to speak, or it's one little street that's, buffered on both sides by, by developable land, and this little street is isolated. It just makes sense to make it uniform. If that's what we're trying to do, is to, bring things in conformity and uniformity, it just makes sense to, to make it the same as all the properties that are surrounding it.
That is correct, sir.
Chair recognizes Ms. Blumer.
Do we have a list of the residents that actually requested this?
I do not. It was transmitted to me by Ms. Love, who received the request from Mr. Each, I believe.
From his group, and I believe he had somebody representing the group. I'm not sure if they did. They did have a representative that was going to be here, former Mayor Pierre, to represent them.
Mhm.
And them wanting, and I'm not sure if anybody is here tonight from that neighborhood group.
And approximately, how many, do we know approximately the residence size right now?
How many units are
Mm-hmm.
They're quadplexes, and I don't have a total units in there, but most of them are quadplexes. Most of them are, thank you, most of them are quadplexes over there. And
Do you know how many?
how many parcels?
Mm-hmm.
No, we just got this.
I'm gonna say that it's maybe 20 parcels, maybe, at the most.
Yeah, at most. Probably a little, maybe 15, 16 parcels.
And I apologize that we're not ready with the answers about that, but literally this morning, we got this information.
We got this request.
Okay,
Well, can I, under normal
Yes.
circumstances, how would this be handled if we weren't doing the comprehensive plan right now?
They would have to apply. This is the opportunity for the community to make recommendations, suggestions, for changes to the comp plan for you all to vote on moving forward
Mhm.
to city council. And then they will be documented, and city council can still make change or not adopt it.
Okay. And the proper format is just to send you an email, or is it?
Now it would be to here, now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we
to-
don't necessarily have to vote on this?
No, in order to move it forward to city council, this request, because we have it,
Uh-huh.
you'll have to vote on it to
Okay.
move it forward.
Oh, okay. So
Mr. Chair, can I ask a quick question? Unless you're not
No,
done.
no, you can.
Yes, Counselor?
With regard to these properties that we're now discussing, I was just wondering, as far as the individual parcel size and how that relates to the permitted development under the proposed category.
I think that would be a zoning question because
Mhm.
the comprehensive plan does not address those kinds of issues.
Correct.
Okay, but is that kind of development pattern logical for these size parcels, or would they have to aggregate?
For redevelopment purposes, high density of 25 units per acre.
And they're quadruplexes now.
And
It's very possible that they are at 25 units per acre
Yeah.
right now.
and they could be, because if you look at the square
Perhaps even
footage
higher.
and at 25 dwelling units per acre, the lot sizes, I was trying to see if I could pull something up. The lot sizes are going to be the lot sizes.
Yeah.
And the calculation will be, if you don't.
Yeah, But you would be getting more units rather than what's already
Yes.
granted right now.
it
I mean,
could
that's
be,
the obvious thing.
pot-
You would be getting more units regardless of what's
Potentially.
there.
Potentially.
Yeah.
You have to calculate it based upon the acreage of, or the square footage of the individual parcels.
Yeah, but
So they
25
they may not be able to put more units on there, or they could.
Well, I mean,
Um,
25, is it 25 units per acre?
25 units
Yes.
per acre.
Even if it was a
So if-
quarter of an acre, I mean, you're getting 6 units? That's 2 more than what's already
Possibly.
there.
No, there's
Mhm. But the more important piece of this is it makes them no longer non-conforming. It
Oh,
would allow
yeah.
them to be conforming properties, because they were conforming before the land use was changed to accommodate Johnson and Wells,
Okay.
Mhm.
right? So we made them non-conforming with the idea that Johnson and Wells was going to buy
Acquire
them
Right.
and use them for student housing. So now we have an opportunity to fix and make them conforming, to fix something that had happened in the
And
past.
bear in mind, because I think we're all conscious of what we're trying to come to here, is Johnson Wells could have done whatever they wanted to to increase the density on that property. Am I not?
No,
Correct.
the student housing is not density. So,
No, but I mean, that's, if this is a concern that's being raised,
They could build student housing.
they could have built student housing there that would have been
Right.
more than 25 units.
that's right,
Right.
because they
So,
didn't
I mean,
have
it- you
it's
know,
not density, it's.
right.
So they could have built more than what they could
They,
do
they
anyway.
certainly could.
Right,
Mr. Chairman?
yes.
Through you to council, since evidently we need a motion, I guess, or a vote on this, is it appropriate now to make a motion or at the end of the presentation?
Yeah,
Well, if,
I don't know about I don't feel comfortable voting on or including this as part of what we're trying to do here tonight, which is approve the comprehensive plan.
Well, I think we have to vote to include it going forward, I think.
Well, then I would motion not to include it at this time.
all right,
Uh,
there's a motion on the floor not to include the, what are we calling it, that particular,
Call it by the
Plan.
street name, what is the name?
Emerald
Drive.
Drive? Not to include the Emerald Drive it's not rezoning, but the, what?
Changing the future land use
Right.
category.
Map
Right.
designation.
Can I make an alternate motion?
I
No,
second
we
the
have one
motion.
motion,
Oh, we have a
and
motion.
yes, sir.
We're waiting on.
and waiting for a second on that?
I second the motion.
So second on the motion. I'm going to do a roll call on this vote. I'll begin with Mr. Rob. Vote to include it or not to include it in the comprehensive, I'm sorry. Mark, my mind went blank here. Mark,
So, to clarify, this is a vote not to include?
yes, this
At
is, a
this
motion's
time?
been made not to include it.
It's a recommendation.
Yeah, it's a
Right.
recommendation.
It's a recommendation not to include it.
Yay,
Yes to include?
to not include it.
Okay, so a yes vote will mean not to include it. Dr. Medina?
Yay.
Dr. Medina, yea. Mr. McDermott?
No.
Mr. McDermott, no. Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Clark, a yes. Mr. Basin? Mr. Basin, yes. Ms. Blemmer?
I just want to reconfirm that, Clark, you said you're not comfortable not to include it.
I feel there's a lot of unknowns. I think it should follow the normal process and come before us with their legal team if they so choose.
At a separate time.
This
Well,
is the process.
No, if there wasn't a comprehensive plan, there's another route for it to come before this board. I
Is
feel
that
like
correct, staff?
that's what
That
she
is
said.
correct, sir. This is just an opportunity for the community
I
to
feel like
bring
it's
forward
being-
I stand
ideas
corrected,
and.
Mr.
And I
Clark,
feel
you're
like
right.
it's being pushed into this comprehensive plan, and I think it needs to be clearly vetted and come
And-
before this board appropriately.
I understand. Thank you, sir.
So I just want to clarify, if we are not including it now, they would have to come back, present it to us, and then we would vote to include it.
No. They have to come back at another time with an application to change the future land use map and the zoning map. Very similar to what you just saw, where they requested a change to extend the SDTOD. It would be to change the land use and the zoning map to reflect high-density residential and R6 or whatever they choose to request.
So if that's the regular process, why is that process not being followed tonight?
Because this is the time where residents and all can request changes to the comp plan, be included into the comp plan, express concerns, maybe make some recommendations. Now's the time to do that. You're taking public input into this, and this has been one of the requests from this community group, is to change that.
May I just interject that the reason why we are entertaining this request is, first of all, because it's not from a single property owner or a developer that is trying to, sort of leverage this. It's a neighborhood,
It's the
essentially,
property owners.
that has been erroneously designated, essentially. And so, from that perspective, it made sense to us. But I understand your concern, and I think either way, it could go. I mean, it could take a while for them to be able to come back until, obviously, this is adopted in March of next year or whenever that happens, but
Again, this is a
definitely possible.
recommendation.
This is
only
just a
this point.
recommendation based
yeah.
on our assessment of, sort of the situation, how it got to this particular situation.
Right,
Mis-
and then her,
Mr. Chair.
so, again, Ms. Blumer, waiting for your vote. Either, yes, you don't want to move it forward as a recommendation, or no, go ahead and move it forward.
I just want to hear Mr. Held for a second.
Sure, and I apologize.
That's fine, go right ahead,
Since we're,
sir.
we're sort of
Mid-vote.
bootstrapping the discussion or something. Ms. Love, can you just take a moment and explain the significance of a non-conforming status for these properties?
Yes, sir. When you are non-conforming, that means you can't, it's
I'm
particular.
sorry, Ms. Love. Mr. Chair, are we following the Robert Rules of Order because there was a motion? 4 people already voted, so.
We're in the middle of a vote,
Mhm.
so I think we need to let that vote continue. And then we'll, all right, as I stated, thank you, Dr. Medina. Ms. Blumer, your vote?
Not to include.
Okay, so that's a yes.
That's a yes.
And final vote, I got everybody, but the chair's vote is no.
Okay, so you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 2. So the motion passed. So that your recommendation will be not to include that change in this comprehensive plan update.
Thank you.
Mr.
That's
Chair,
correct.
since the vote is completed, can Ms. Love answer the question?
Yes,
Thank
or
you.
you may
Certainly.
continue, I'm sorry.
When properties are non-conforming, they're non-conforming for a number of reasons. It can be the site itself, it can be the structure, and in this case, or the use, and in this case, it's a use. Because residential, like this, where it's multifamily, is not allowed in the community facility university land use district. Student housing would have been, if they bought the properties and converted them. So they can't really do anything with that property. So they're fairly stuck with what they have now. They can't add a story. They can't add an addition because the use is non-conforming. So you can't increase the non-conformity of the use, lot, or whatever the non-conformity is. So we've heard from this community area a number of times about their concern about not being able to do anything with their property. We've actually had to deny folks who came in and wanted to add an addition, so.
And they've come before the planning commission before?
No, we've told them that the process is your zoning and land use doesn't allow it, and you would have to modify that. And Councilwoman Estimate Irvin had anticipated seeing changes to that zoning, because when we extended the train station overlay, she said the rest of the properties will be handled during the comp plan, right? And after we analyzed it, and we saw that those properties were the only ones that were there, they came, and then they happened to come in with that request. It made sense for us, considering the fact that they're high-density residential here, high-density residential there, that would be what we would recommend to you all, is to just reflect that high-density residential.
Thank you.
You're welcome, ma'am.
So
we
we
ready?
may continue.
All right.
Yes, thank you for your
Sure.
patience.
No, not at all. This is very helpful. So now we're going to get into, I'm sorry that this is so long, and I appreciate your continued attention.
That's right, it's
Um,
very important that we cover every aspect.
I appreciate that as well. So we're going to get into the meat of the amendments. We're not going to go line by line. We're going to give you a brief summary of the sort of the key or the highlights of the key changes that we're making. Again, we're not writing entire new elements except for one. So a lot of what you will see is us tweaking language, trying to strengthen a policy, trying to clarify a policy. We're also, in fact, let me go to my next slide. For different kinds of amendments. The first one, of course, is for us to be able to be in compliance with the statutes, reflecting changes to the Florida statutes, reflecting changes to the Florida Administrative Code, Miami-Dade Comprehensive Plan, and other agency plans that have had changes since 2015, which is when the last EAR was done here. We also have updated the planning horizon, as you know, so everywhere that there were references to things that were going to happen by a certain date, like it said, you know, in some cases said by 2016 we will do this, or by 2020 we will do this. We looked at that. We met with the different department heads, representatives of the departments to talk about what has happened in those years since 2015. You know, has this been completed? Is this ongoing? Does this need to happen still? Even if it didn't happen then, is it still important? So we did a lot of that sort of cleanup, going through all of the elements. And we also did a little bit of a stylistic cleanup. I think we probably can do a little more, but we're not working with you know, a new language, a new wording. We're working with existing statements. So what we have tried to do as much as possible is to create a consistent language, because as you read through it, you can even sort of tell that there have been different authors and they all write differently and they all have sort of their own style. So we've tried to do that, but perhaps the most important kinds of changes have been with regard to incorporating policies that reflect the changed local conditions and that reflect those 4 major themes that we have been talking about. So generally speaking, we have put a lot of emphasis on these 4 priorities: the community health and wellness, technology, infrastructure and access, housing affordability, and climate protection and environmental protection and climate change response. We have tried to weave these throughout all of the elements. There are elements that speak specifically to those topics, such as, you know, your climate change element. So obviously that's going to be an emphasis that element will have on its own. You may have noticed, if you go through the comprehensive plan, that there are, under some objectives, there are monitoring and evaluation statements. And as we went through, we felt like a lot of those were not written as monitor and evaluation statements. A lot of them were simply policies. And they really did not give the city a good way to measure progress, which is what a monitoring and evaluation statement needs to do. So what we did, because the comprehensive plan also has a monitoring and evaluation chapter that speaks as to how the city periodically updates the comprehensive plan and what it does to track progress and all of that, we pulled the monitoring and evaluation statements out of the elements. We looked at them carefully to make sure that they still, you know, were relevant, that they were written as such, and we put them into that chapter at the end. What we did with the actual elements is that we instead introduced what we're calling the performance indicators. So not for every objective, but for the majority of objectives that we could actually measure progress, we have introduced some suggested performance indicators. So for example, if you're talking about, well, you know, one of the policies, let me just make this one up. The city is going to emphasize the construction or the development of a network of greenways throughout the city. One of your potential indicators for that would be how many miles of additional greenway do you develop on an annual basis, right? So these are, you know, actual measurable factors, right? So that's how we have addressed that. we have tried to reframe the policy statements are actual action statements. So, you know, in comprehensive plans, there's typically a lot of the city shall do this, the city shall do that, and it's sort of very impersonal. It's like, we're the city. We're the ones who are doing this. So we have tried to recast the statements as like, we're doing it, right? We have tried to introduce as much flexibility in the overall tone of these elements to allow for innovation and to encourage innovation and collaboration as much as possible. As I mentioned, we also have strengthened the monitoring and evaluation chapter. These last few changes that I have on my list may seem like they're cosmetic, but they're supposed to have meaning to reflect better what we're trying to do. So instead of a transportation element, we're talking about mobility, because mobility is a lot more comprehensive. The city is in a concurrency, the transportation concurrency exception area, which requires the city to actually have a focus on comprehensive mobility, looking not just at cars or public transit, but every form of transportation. And that's what we have tried to reflect, and that's what we're trying to do with the changes that we have introduced. The climate change element is great, but we're adding resilience to the name, since this is one of our topics. The economic development, we're changing it to economic development because that's really what we're trying to do. I mentioned that we have a new community health and wellness element, and the city recently, not that long ago, I can't remember, but it's been in the last 6 months, adopted a required property rights element. So we have taken that and we have introduced it here. That was already done, is just incorporated into the overall body. So now we have that added. I'm going to talk first about the land use element. I'm sort of casting these, the goals of each element, the city's commitments. These are the things we're going to do, right? We aspire to these things. These are the things that we're going to do. So there's, in this element now, a lot of emphasis on resilience, on community health and wellness, on equity, on green design and sustainability. We are prioritizing walkable land patterns. You know, you already had a lot of that with your TODs and some of your mixed-use districts and overlays, but we're trying to make that more prominent and support the idea of a multimodal transportation network that speaks to this mobility aspect. We are prioritizing quality of design in the public realm. We're prioritizing fairness in the delivery of services and livability across the city. And we're putting emphasis on the idea that, yes, we are for growth in this city. That's what you have been for a long time, and you have the policies in place that support that, but you need to have adequate infrastructure in place to support the growth as it happens. So that's kind of for the goal framework and objective framework. In the specifics of elements, I'm just going to say that, well, first of all, I already mentioned the fact that we're recommending removing the NRO. That's one of the big changes in this element. We're also updating and expanding the framework for home occupations, and Mr. Attorney has pointed out to me that we still need to do a little bit of work on that to make sure that we match the I can't remember when that was passed, but yeah, from the Florida statutes, that's been changes that make it more difficult for local governments to regulate home occupations. So we need to make sure that our policies are reflective of that. So one of the things that you might want to vote on is to direct us to recommend changes that to the home occupation policies that reflect that Florida statute better than it does, even in our current language. Another big change that we have made is, I mentioned that we're putting 8,700 units, specifically 8,725 units in the floating pool. So that's a little bit more than the bare need, right? That's a little bit more than the bare need. So what we're suggesting is that little excess, which is about 1,300 units, that we dedicated to incentivizing affordable and workforce housing. So that would be, the policy basically says that the city will reserve 15% of the total floating unit pool of 8725 to incentivize affordable and workforce housing. And in companion to that, that there would be for development projects that actually provide a minimum of 10% of affordable or workforce housing in the PCD. This is the part where the floating pool serves to direct growth into priority areas. That then, if a development project comes in the PCD or the NMTOD and dedicates a minimum of 10% to workforce or affordable housing, then they can apply to get a density bonus. So that's the incentive, a density bonus of up to 15 additional units per acre in those areas. Debbie mentioned this, but two things that we're trying to do is to enact in this element stronger protections for residents from potential displacement through development, and also introducing policies to better protect existing single-family neighborhoods.
Chairman,
Yes, Ms. Blumer.
I have a quick question.
Mhm.
Just a brief overview. When you say stronger protection, specifically what are you speaking to?
Do you want me to actually read you language?
If you can just give me two examples.
Let me see if I can find the specific policies, but we have actually added an entire section about single-family neighborhood protection.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can find it, this is why I like to have my laptop with me, because I can just do a search. So bear with me just for a second.
No problem.
Okay, so as I mentioned, in the case of single-family residential neighborhoods, we have added an entire section that speaks to that did not exist before.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, we have an objective that says that the city will protect and enhance the distinctive qualities of character, setting, buildings, structures, significant landscape features, and public spaces of the city's existing single-family residential neighborhoods in a manner that improves the quality of life for residents and is consistent with and supported by this comprehensive plan. And we have new performance indicators for that, a number of them. I'm going to just tell you, for example, one of them is for tracking the number of rehabilitation and improvement projects, or the number of the number and types of complaints regarding property maintenance. That could be, so if they go up or they go down, those would be things that the city would track. And there's a whole list of those potential indicators here. There's a policy that specifically says that the city will retain the traditional development pattern of existing single-family neighborhoods. So, we have done something. We have taken the NRO out, which basically would change the traditional pattern of the neighborhoods that had the overlay.
Mm-hmm.
So in addition to doing that, we're specifically saying we will protect the pattern of those neighborhoods, right?
Right. I just wanted to understand exactly what is something that you will do to do that. It's just ensuring that the policies that are in place remain.
The policies are in place. That's the first step. The other step is looking at your LDRs and making sure that there are first of all, no barriers to protecting the neighborhoods, and also no incentives to destroying those
Okay.
neighborhoods. So that's something specific that would come out. And you will see as you go through the language that there's a lot of statements that start with examine the LDRs and do this or that, right? So that's something that is in this section. It's something that is in many other sections, policies of the comprehensive plan. Let's see. I think that those are the most important ones. But we also have a lot of expansion of policies that have to do with resilience and environmental sustainability, including, for example, the future land use element doesn't just talk about land use. It actually touches on a lot of different topics. And so we even go into things like, electric vehicles. Yes.
I had a question about the NRO overlay that you were mentioning
Yes,
earlier. Do you think that removing the NRO overlay kind of dilutes the city's plan to revitalize the downtown area? any way?
No, I do not, because downtown has its own overlay. So there is a downtown district, first of all, that has, its own category with its own standards, and it has a zoning that also has, those kind of regulatory incentives and protections. But in addition to that, there's an overlay that is over that area in downtown. So that will bring the redevelopment incentive to that area.
Thank you.
Right? Sure. Let's see, what else? I want to, well, first of all, I want to sit down for a little bit because I am pending a hip replacement in a couple of weeks and I'm dying right here.
Right.
But I want to turn it over to my colleagues to talk about their topics. But let me see. I'm not going to get too much into a lot of these bullet points. They're not as important as the ones that I have already talked about. But I am going to say that we have also introduced two what I think are pretty significant. I'm excited about both of those sections about technology-driven uses in employment-oriented districts. We're sort of trying to tie this land use piece to the economic development piece, obviously, with the idea of this medical innovation district around the UHealth new campus or use. So we have introduced that, and we also have an entirely new section that we have added at the end of this chapter that speaks to public participation in the development process. So it sets up some parameters for the city to begin to create processes for expanding notice and looking at other means to notice people, to include them and to incorporate them into the development process. We'll move on to mobility next, I'm sorry. So the commitments here are to provide for a safe, convenient, effective, and inclusive multimodal transportation system that is tailored to the vision of North Miami's future, which is, spread out over all the elements. But as we talked about, is one that is of a complete community. Support close coordination and integration between the land use pattern and the transportation planning, emphasizing multimodal mobility, safety, convenience, equitable access, improving the viability of walking as a safe mode of transportation. We heard about people prioritizing the sidewalk network and adding bicycle lanes, so that kind of goes to that. And considering health aspects of mobility infrastructure decisions. So when we put mobility infrastructure, does that have an impact, a positive impact on community health by allowing people to move more without getting into a car? So some of the key recommendations for policies have to do with emphasizing transit orientation of development in the overlay districts that are meant to do that, making sure that the standards in the LDRs actually are effective in doing that. Let's see, updating the bicycle master plan. I think that's really critical because I've looked at the bicycle master plan and it needs an update, to be honest. Looking at the LDRs, I mentioned that there would be a lot of mentions of the LDRs needing to be updated in order to align with the new policies with respect to multimodal transportation systems, electric vehicle infrastructure, or other alternative fuel or low emission vehicles, considering climate change factors in making land use development and mobility infrastructure decisions, and a new section of policies that link mobility design and equitable transportation, including universal design, which means that everybody, regardless of their age or their condition of health, can use all the mobility infrastructure. Housing I'm going to turn it over
Um,
to Eric. Yes.
Yeah, if we could stop, I think we need to all take a break. I see some
That would
people
be,
kind
that would
of-
be okay with me.
All right, let's take let's make a 5-minute break, if
All
that's all right with everyone, and we'll adjourn for 5 minutes, and then we'll pick up at the housing element, correct?
Thank you. Yes,
All right,
sir.
thank you.
There is a form on the website in the comments. But you can email me too. I mean, my contact is there. Sure. Yeah, I can give you. I'm sorry, I'm not. But they're just saying email you? You can, sure, yeah. Yes, so do Vargas, but, my email is svargas@cgasolutions.com. CGA. Solutions.com. And please copy that. Yeah, of course, no. And you probably do, yeah. Well, I would not necessarily say that it's missing. There have been opportunities, and we have talked to the public, obviously, and they're still getting survey. We want to use the survey in terms of like getting input into the priorities that we're working with, obviously. But any comment can come through. I get all the comments that come through the website. I do get those. I get notified when that comes in, just like I get notifications when that survey comes in. But if you want to email me directly, for sure, that's the way.
Like the bike master plan, I mentioned that, I mean, there's been a lot of work, the day packs, have been doing a lot on bike planning. There's suggestions or solutions. Oh, hey, Brad. Have a lot of different I'd imagine that if you have some future suggestions, it'd be awesome to have something, the planning that we've talked about has been based on, the vision of day packs in the downtown area, but obviously if there's other things, like a few years back, everybody helped sign us together, and a lot of like planning was done by the consultant side at the time. But if what you're saying is making something better, could we
what improvements to actually consider, and the timing of those, and what funding.
But so what you're saying is in the comp plan, the city should update their plan, not that.
Right, we don't have, yeah, it's a high level policy recommendation, we don't have details, like, and we're not saying this is the way it should be done.
Right.
But we're just saying, you need to update it.
Right, and that, I mean, zero doubt, and not only do they need to update it, but there needs to be a plan for implementation, because that's the other
Yes.
issue. It's one thing to have a plan, it's another thing to actually enact it. That needs to happen if we want to have any hope.
Sure. So that's why, for example, we are putting some performance indicators in the sector. I think in that specific element. And I'm sorry, I'm not standing to look, because I really need my 5-minute break. That would say, you know, how many miles of new bicycle lanes are added.
Oh, it's not freezing.
cough.
Well, it looks like Warnock won.
I think that we can stop at this point, and if you want to go back and vote on that, that's fine. Yeah, because he surprised me at the beginning when he said, we'll go through the whole presentation and then we'll go back and do elements, but I think we can do it this way. I agree with you. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, no, of course, how you doing, Debbie? Nice to see you. Yes, everybody's hacking up there.
They said we needed a vote.
It did get cold.
No, I think he's my chest.
Yeah.
NRO, should we talk about the NRO?
Better.
Windbreaker, I'm getting all.
Well, she was the one that said, Gary,
It was initiated.
the presenter was the one who said we needed a vote.
Where the NRO is and show what.
But we should have had it.
with it. So the
Well, you
picture
should have
you
stopped.
have is the current.
Well, he attempted.
I tried. I was actually out of order, as Dr. Medina
I thought we did have a discussion. It was one to discuss.
But it wasn't explained to us. The second go around was more clear and concise.
One is the one that we did, and one is the one that the city has.
Well,
But again, it was a recommendation.
well,
It still has to go before the commission, and they still have to have a discussion on it.
If we can get everybody back to the chamber so we can continue. I have to leave at 10. Definitely. Just
so
talk
you
with-
want me to fill in for you after?
You're gonna have to, let's do the housing element, and you're gonna have to step in, before we do the housing element.
Okay,
And we'll open up discussion for
okay.
land use
Just
and then.
let me know when.
I got everyone's attention that whoever's out in the lobby, still waiting for Commissioner Blamur. Okay, we will continue. We're now back in session. If I may, Sylvia, we've completed the land use presentation. Is that correct? So
Yes.
before you move on to the housing, what we want to keep with the format that I had mentioned to everyone, and I want to go ahead and open up the public hearing to discuss, to get public input into what you presented in the land use portion of the presentation. So at this point, I'm opening up public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on any of the issues that pertains to the land use elements that you heard in the presentation, please step forward, give your name and address, and you'll have 2 minutes, everyone, 2 minutes to make your presentation. And please have it directed toward what was discussed or was presented in that portion of the EAR. All right, so public hearing is open. Good evening, ma'am. Name and address, please.
Hi, Sarah McDevitt, 14490 Northeast 10th Avenue. So a lot was presented just now, and the thing I just want to go back to, because she started her presentation talking about the public engagement aspect of her process. You can see that a lot of work has been done, and there's been a lot that they've put together on the back end, but my really big concern is that we have not engaged the public. There have been 2 opportunities that they were physically present for the public, one of which I just happened across, and I will tell you, they had information there, but this moment here is the first time that the public is actually having an opportunity to address individual elements of this plan, and I don't think that's fair to the public. I think that there's a lot more engagement that needs to happen, and maybe the directive they were given was not complete, but right now this is not a great format for the public to come up and really have a say in what's going to happen for the next 7 years in our community, and that's my big concern. Speaking directly to the actual land use, you know, like the NRO right now, that is a massive piece of land that we're talking about rezoning. Many residents in that neighborhood, I know potentially, because we don't know what the effect is since we can't see the purple without that overlay, block by block, are there residents in that community who now have dense multifamily being put up right next door to them? If we peel away that NRO, will it leave them without the possibility to redevelop their land as they've been promised? You know, they have a 12-story building next to them. Peeling away that NRO, does it mean that they will no longer be able to build dense housing just north of that new Gardens residence, for example? You know, there's a lot of questions that I think are out there. You guys took away Emerald, but what about the rest of it? We haven't really, as public, been able to understand all that's been presented. So that's my really big concern. You know, the rest of it, I think that they're doing an interesting job of presenting, but I just would like more chance to interact with the plan and understand it better and have more members of the public engaged. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, sir. Name and address, please.
Rafael Enrique Erazo, 11930 North Bay Shore Drive. Well, to begin with, I want to thank God for allowing us to be here. I'm particularly going to talk about the North Bay Shore area. Well, and thank you guys for taking this as consideration. We all know that we have great opportunities in front of us when the zoning is increased. Let's just think about such as job opportunities, tax revenue, increases our neighbors' home values, and also we will have quality first-class homes. The city is in big trouble right now, and we need like a total game changer. I mean, seriously, a total game changer. Let's say towards the sky's the limit. We have in front of us opportunity to actually increase the zoning of that is going to bring developers to the city. Well, it's a lot more that I would like to say, but right now I just want to focus on your guys' decision, on letting you guys know that right now we have an opportunity that we cannot close this door. We have to focus. We have to really, really concentrate and meditate on the opportunity that we have in front of us. Let's bring and let's have the city of North Miami the future of now. Let's make this city the future now. We be taking too long. I mean, we have everything else around us going up, and we just staying behind. Like, seriously, I have 4 kids. They go to school here, and I'm looking after the future. We have so many problems around the city. Water everywhere, sewers, pipelines, and we need this tax revenue. And this is the only way to actually make this happen. So please take this in consideration, and thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, Karen.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. Karen Dillion, 1935 South Hibiscus. Thank you very much. And I don't always know what I'm talking about when it comes to this, so please excuse me if I say something extremely ignorant. One thing I do know about, though, is community outreach, and I don't know, the message I get from the city 99.9% of the time is that we don't want the community involved, and it's no disrespect to the package that you guys are putting forth, which looks beautiful, but it's the normal, this room is empty. I mean, I remember 7 years ago, wasn't this room full? What's going on that we don't have our residents here? And I'm sorry, but a sample size of less than 100 for a city of over 60,000, it's embarrassing, and it shows. I don't know of anything clearer that shows that we're not reaching our homeowners associations. And as president of a homeowners association, why weren't you at my homeowners meetings? Why weren't we calling together homeowners associations? Why weren't we doing public forums? What the heck is wrong with us that we can throw parties, but we can't to ask the public their opinion on things that matter? And this matters. And all due respect, height is great. I don't want it next to my house. I live in a single family home. I love North Miami for the single family homes, and I never believe that there's gonna be a Solomia or a Johnson & Wales or anything that's gonna come along and save us, other than us looking at our responsibility to keep good in our city and put high density where it belongs, which preferably, if you're going to take an Emerald Lake, and thank you for voting the way you did without those residents here, but to me, you need to have something that's, you go from lower to medium to high. It isn't one next to the other. We don't do that next to Biscayne Park single family homes, and why in the heck do we do it next to our own? So I do appreciate at any point when you're doing single family that we're looking at what is adjacent to single family. Do we go from the regular single family to over 100 and something feet without the correct word that I don't know the correct word for? Buffer zone? We'll go with that. Unit pool 8,700. I'm assuming that only happens if we have the infrastructure to be able to flush our toilets and do all that like for adequate infrastructure change. Yes, expand public input. Will you be talking about flooding in King Tide? Bike master plan? Fantastic. And thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Some of the other elements, again, we'll have an opportunity to address specifically those issues. Good evening. Name and address, please.
Good evening, Patricia Wood, 11930 North Bayshore Drive, Unit 806. And thank you for allowing us this opportunity to talk and say what we think about this comprehensive plan that we have it every 7 years, so I don't want to miss this opportunity since it's 7 years. And to ask you to have some consideration and thoughts regarding the Bayshore Zone. That's one of the most beautiful areas in our city. And considering to increase the height over there, and that will be really positive for the income of the city, and people like I living on one of the towers right there facing the water, that will help to increase also the values of my apartments and many apartments over there and bring a lot of incomes to the city of North Miami. I appreciate all your thoughts regarding this. Thank you and good evening.
Thank you. Hi,
Hello,
good evening.
everybody.
No, I'm keeping time.
Okay. Hello, my name is Marisol Medina. I live at 1270 Northeast 124th Street. I'm very glad that these young ladies were part of the team. It really feels like they care about what's going on in the city. Even though they might not be part of it, it shows in their work that they have a vision that matches what the citizens are wanting for this community. There are a couple of sections which I'm very happy that the NRO may be going away, because that mismatch posh that was happening with all of the different overlays made it very uncomfortable for citizens in one-story houses having to fight against a 20-story, which is something, unfortunately, that is already in effect for a lot of us since the new developments that have already come in. I like what the previous young lady mentioned with the Bayshore area. I mean, a lot of what's going down on Biscayne is really high, close to the water. There's nothing going on over there. It matches what's already there. I think that's a beautiful incorporation, as well as what's going on with the White House. And I mean, it feels like that should very much match. that style. There was a section, hold on, I'm gonna try to find it again. I was a little confused with the maps because there were different ones going on, so I got clarification here towards the end. There is a section on 125th and 4th that goes from being, I think it's 150 feet down to then getting close, now this is 125th and 4th. Then you get closer to the shoreline, which I think is Griffin Park, and it goes to 110. I was kind of curious why there's that big jump there, and that maybe it can go more transitional to being from the 150 to meeting that street of Griffin to then going down, because it felt like a little bit of a jump there. I think it'd be important, since that's our art overlay, that it matches some of the new arts developments that are coming into this city that have great plans for creating their home base here, or they've already created their home base, excuse me. And they have 3 properties within that zone that could really do well for artists and residents and the community at large. Thank you for your
Thank you.
Ms. Medina, did you have any specific thing for the Bay Shore that you wanted us to discuss?
Yeah, there's a property there between Mallorca and the parks that is no longer there, as well as the one next to it. Like, that whole line seems like it should match. And I saw that.
Match what?
Match the heights of Mallorca, or maybe more. I feel like that whole strip should be at a different height level, much higher, since they're on the shoreline, as well as White House Inn has their height. So I just feel like uniformity is better in a zone like that. So yes.
Okay.
Okay,
Did you
thank
have any more questions?
Thank you. Next, please. Good evening. Name and address, please.
Luis Bojorquez, 1230 Northeast, 129th Street. I would like to talk about the height in different areas. The street that you guys were discussing prior, like Emerald Drive, I actually looked it up, and of course you guys voted on it. You're going to bring it forward in the future. That area in particularly, there's a lot of duplexes, a lot of 8-unit locations there. It's very beautiful. It's no ending zone. Let me see. So basically, I looked up the area, I looked up the street, and it could have a potential of increasing the amount of units in that area. But you have other locations like North Bay that she was mentioning, and I think areas like those, they could benefit that location 100 times fold. The benefits will outdo the concerns for the people living there. It will open the door for investors to our city. When you have a city that is welcoming to developers, I pursue to be a developer in the future. If I was hunting for a city in particularly that I want to invest on, I want to make sure that the people there and just the community in general is welcoming. There are not going to be issues, and that alone is going to just outsource a lot of investors to come more in the future if we allow a higher height. Let me see. Sorry about that. I don't do this often. The future is up. For example, Miami Beach, they have a new building called Waldorf. They were accepted 100 floors of beautiful residence. 1,049 feet is an impressive property. Miami is continue to grow. Every day I go there and it's like a new building every time, full of opportunity, and that is gonna outgrow, and those opportunities are gonna outsource more towards our areas. Are we gonna welcome and allow that in our city? Are we gonna allow the investment, the new revenue from tax, the new opportunities for work? Behind me, you're gonna see a few workers here that are looking forward to work in these new properties. And not only is it temporary work, it's more work for the people that live
Thank you.
here. Of course, like the carrot.
I'm so sorry.
Try to wrap up if you could,
Oh,
please.
so sorry.
Yes, that's what the little bells.
Basically, it would provide sorry about that. It would provide a ton more work, a ton more opportunity. It's going to show that the city is welcoming new developers and new opportunities. and just the benefits will outdo the concerns.
Thank you very much. We have Good evening, Mr. Prevotel. Name and address, sir.
Evening. William Prevotel, 12,000 North Bay Shore Drive. If you'll indulge me a little bit, back in September 11th of 2001, I remember seeing on the TV the initial plane getting hit, and I remember going up to the roof of my building at Midtown. And because I had studied the configuration of that from the prior attempt to take the building down, I was concerned. And I told my neighbor, looking down to the south, down to the towers, I said, that's a big fire. If it doesn't get put out in 1 hour, the building will come out in 2. I was off by a number of minutes. As I look at our maps of North Miami, I see vast areas of yellow, meaning single-family homes, much of it 1-story, 2-story. I know a lot of it's built in the 1940s, 1950s, 1960s. I know that none of it is hurricane hardened. And I know if we get a category 4 or 5, these people are devastated. From one end to the other of the city, one end to the other, top to bottom. I also know that economically things are not that easy from one end to the other, because I know that people on the waterfront are struggling with their $1,900 a month comment charge, and therefore they're many months behind. They're going into foreclosure in the most premier apartment that our city has. And then I see a city that's vulnerable, that's cutting it close to the bone in terms of our infrastructure. We have a water system that leaks 25 to 35% of its outflow. We have sewage system that backs up into people's houses from the street, not from their toilets, from the street. And we have, on the sunniest of days, we get a rain shower, and before you know it, we have flooded streets. We lost a beautiful SUV trying to get home. Complete SUV junked because we lost the engine. How do we pay for that? How can the people of our city possibly pay for that? There is a possibility. I'm here to promote the increased height for the Bay Shore zone, that if we do something significantly higher, it would be condominium, it would sell at a vast price, and it could bring in as much as more than $10 million a year. And that's not even taking out the lower tower, Majorca.
Mr. Prevotel, that's your 2 minutes.
Okay.
Sir, thank you very much.
Can I just read into the part that would be changed?
No, sir, okay, go ahead and read it in and
yeah, okay.
make it
In
brief,
our Chapter 29 of the North Miami Zoning Code, Section 4-307, Planned Community Urban Design Overlay, PCUD. B, Conceptual Master Development. 1, height of 450 feet of building height above the parking pedestal. In such instance, the height of the parking pedestal shall be set as part of the conditional use permit. That is taken from Solomia, Biscayne Landing. What we're asking is that that height be applied to the Bay Shore zone. Not changing density in any way, not changing anything else. No traffic studies, no sanitation studies. Just allow a bigger, better building that can be sold for more. That's people's 3rd, 4th, or 5th house. And we get that money from them. We could apply it across the city.
Okay.
It would benefit everybody, including the people of that neighborhood.
Thank you,
Thank
Bill.
you very much.
Thank you.
Is that a discussion item?
Hello,
Hi, good evening, ma'am.
good evening. Alina Medina, 1270 Northeast, 124th Street. I'm a little concerned about the growth that we're having, and that I don't know how much money is going to be invested in our infrastructure, sewage as part of it, you know. So I hope that is a lot of the money is allocated to that is maybe a number 1 priority for a lot of people that live in North Miami. I also think about the parking spaces that we are currently allotted for apartments being 1.5 for every apartment. Could that possibly increase to 2, at least 2? So no, we don't have all that big overflow in apartment areas into the streets. And I know we are also dedicating in this study some money allocated for increasing bicycle, transit. But that is not safe in our city. We're not really made up. It's a great concept, but I don't think really people are safe in the streets riding bicycles. It's very dangerous, actually. And also, I see that we have a lot of neighbors, talking about increasing their height in the Bay Shore. So, if that's possible, maybe that's the best area to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to address land use elements? Step forward, give your name and address, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tirso Silvestri. I used to live in 119 North Bayshore Drive, and I heard about the project that is going in development, and I prefer that the higher the building are, the better for the city and the better for everyone else. Because, for example, I'm a worker. I'm in a hotel that is in downtown Miami, and it's 70 floor height, and I'm working over there 15 years. So I think that the higher the building, the better for everyone. It's safer for the hurricanes when they come to the area, and also for the people that lives in there. That's it.
Thank you very much. Any other people, any other residents wishing to speak on the land use element? If not, seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. Public hearing is now closed.
Question?
I have a question. Yes,
Yeah.
Mr. McDermott.
I guess the question is for council and for the presenter for the plan. We've had several people make suggestions of items to be discussed. Now, are these something for us to discuss? Does it go to your survey? As I say, there's been a couple people who've said, like you to consider this, like you to consider that. Is those items for discussion now? Do they become part of your survey? Which?
We certainly can add a question to the survey with regards to building heights, but it has been brought up already by several people, and I think it's something that you all would need to discuss as well, if you choose to. And if you vote on making that a recommendation, we don't, I think that Debbie explained, we're not necessarily make any changes to this package, but it's going to be put into, I'm trying to take notes, but I hope you are, Debbie, a memorandum documenting all the comments and all the recommendations from the Planning Commission, that they would go into a separate document provided to the council, and they will review both the elements and your recommendations, which may include all of those comments from the public.
So staff and Michael, if you wish to concur with any recommendations that you hear from the public, or you would like to present that in the form of a motion, if that's correct, Counselor or staff, that be made as a recommendation to be noted and sent forth as a part of their presentation.
Well,
Is that the correct way?
I had a question before we go that far, or I guess discussion.
Well, let me solve how we can set up a discussion.
Okay.
Because I need direction from the staff here with regards to whether or not we need to vote. If someone wants to follow up with making a motion to present something that they've gotten from the general public as a recommendation. So what I'm doing, Counselor, is opening the panel to discussion, and if someone wants to make a motion on that discussion, they can.
Yes, sir. So it is entirely within your discretion to take any of the points raised by the public and consider it as part of a motion. However, I do suggest after somebody makes a motion, you actually have a discussion on it so that it can be fully vetted because as an example of the last vote that you took, we didn't really have the opportunity to discuss it.
Right.
So if somebody's going to make a motion and it's seconded, at least take a few minutes and have a discussion about it, maybe
Certainly.
allow staff to comment on it.
All right. So, rather than open discussion, I'll entertain a motion to open the discussion on if someone has I need the motion, sir.
Well, I had a question before we motioned.
All right,
Just-
go ahead.
Just
Oh,
for
I-
clarity, I had a question, just for clarity. I think the Bay Shore has already come before this board. We voted on it. It then went to the commission, and they made their own votes, right? Is that correct? So would this be a reversal of that to take it back before commission, I guess, this recommendation would be?
What happened at planning commission, I mean, you all denied it.
Correct.
right? And it went to city council, and city council also denied it, and the property owner came back, so they're limited to 100 feet. So they're not even at what is allowed currently in the Bay Shore. They're
Yeah.
capped at 100 feet.
So if memory serves me right, when it came before this board, we actually increased the height. They didn't get exactly what they requested, but we did increase it.
Yeah, that was a White House Inn.
That's the White House.
Well, no, it
Not the
also
height.
extended,
No, I think we're talking about the White House. I think that
it was the White House, but it also.
Right, which
was-
is the Bay Shore,
Which is the Bay Shore.
because they
It's
were
the Bay Shore.
requesting to be in the Bay Shore
Correct.
zone.
It's in the Bay Shore zone.
Now,
So what are they asking for right now?
to match the height, like the request before was 169
Correct.
feet. This is saying, matching Solomia, which, bear with me just a moment, which actually says, and Mr. Prevotel read off a portion of it. It allows.
450.
Open up.
450.
Yeah,
My apologies.
yeah, if memory serves me right, they wanted White House to become part of Bay Shore.
Is it 250?
Right, and so there were
is.
two requests.
Yeah.
One to change the zoning
Correct,
and future land use to Bay Shore.
correct.
The other was to increase the height of the Bay Shore zone, the
Correct.
entire Bay Shore zone, to 169 feet. And currently in the Bay Shore, it is,
115.
thank you.
115, yeah.
And it, when it went to city council, they didn't get 115, they got 100 feet. So you all said at that point that you didn't want to increase the height in the Bay Shore zone. We had a lot of folks turn out who were against the increase in height. But it was specific for that one parcel. It didn't talk about the rest of the Bay Shore zone.
Right.
What this is now matching what the PCUD says, which is Solomia. And in Solomia, it's 450 feet over 6 stories of parking. So the
450,
450 feet over the first six floors of parking does not count.
So 6 floors of parking could be 60 feet.
60 feet, correct. It'd be over
So that
500 feet.
first does not count. So it's
Right.
450 over top of that. And that's what Mr. Prevotel was asking. And the other residents didn't speak of a specific height limit. They just spoke about increasing
Right.
the height in the Bay Shore zone. But Mr. Prevotel's request was very specific to match Solomia's number. So that's what they're asking for.
What is Majorca?
It's Bay Shore.
No, I know it's Bay Shore. What is the height?
The height of the building, I don't recall right now what the existing height of the building is.
yeah, I believe it
It's
was
the
one,
very last
no, I
one.
believe it was like, whatever they were requesting, they were using Mayoka as an example.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I'm gonna assume it's 169,
Yeah.
Is
That was-
Majorca
I
169?
don't think they're
169.
quite that high.
Because I know when
But they
we
said
had the
it wasn't
discussion,
going to
Mayoka
be-
wasn't, the height wasn't standard for the zone it was in.
Right.
I remember when we
It
had the
definitely, it's a
discussion.
little high.
It was higher
definitely
than what was
than-
allotted for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it was built so long ago.
Correct.
So when they're asking for 450 over the 6 stories to match, that's the specific request that Mr. Prevotel announced, that he would like for you all to consider
Well-
supporting.
It really should be
How would that fall in as far as,
Understand that right.
as fulfilling it as a recommendation in the EAR? Does it need to go through this process?
It's the same as what,
It would
the
normally be.
request for R6, the R6
The R6.
recommendation. You all can move it forward, or you could say, as you're telling the other property owners, apply for it on your own and not make it part of this process. So those are your options, and you all can make the decision as to what you want to recommend.
And Counselor, you said that I have to open up the floor for a motion to even open up the discussion on this?
Only at the committee. And it's only if somebody makes a motion. But I do have an additional point, just, I think you need to take assessment of where you are. There are 15 elements.
Right.
And
I know.
I don't know how long the consultant wanted to make a presentation, how long you wanted to go with the hearing, but you may need to review where you are at the moment and
Well, we have,
long
how
it
many
will
more
take.
elements to go?
14.
14 will never get
We're
done
not going to
tonight.
talk about the property rights element, so there's that.
That's already been adopted. And we're really not talking about the monitoring and evaluation, because that is not in your package, and they're still tweaking
Right.
those monitoring.
As
items.
staff knows, I called them, I'm under a time limit because of health reasons that I have to address with family member. So I want to wrap this up. And so if there's any discussion on this, I'll open the,
I'll make a motion to discuss it, yeah.
To what?
To discuss the item.
well, we're now in a discussion phase of this.
I just don't know how we
And then-
can bring forth something where originally developers came before us for the area and advocated for 160, I don't know the exact numbers, 169.
Sir, please, Mr. Prevotel, I will have you removed if you cannot maintain order. Sir, one more time,
It's a different site.
let us discuss this
Part of the
among
Bay Shore.
ourselves.
It's part of the Bay Shore area. It affects the community that is around, which is abutting to Bay Shore. Now we're asking to go to 460 something, and we're trying to do that tonight without I just don't see how we could be asked to make a motion. We can take note of the request, I would assume.
Just
Yes,
like we-
that's
like
correct.
we
think
did
we
at
That's
the
should
end.
correct.
Voting.
That's correct.
And
And
that's
that's
just my
why I
opinion.
wanted to, this is, we're discussing this.
Correct. This
without
decision has a bigger
motion.
impact on the community around it, if we're talking about 460 feet.
Right.
450 over 6 stories.
Correct.
But since we had a motion on that previous
It's at our
thing,
discretion is what we're being
Since
told.
we, right, so if we don't want to entertain, I can entertain a motion if no one doesn't want to make a motion.
He did already.
All right, so
I-
yeah, but you motioned to have a discussion, correct? So we're having our discussion.
We are.
Yes, ma'am.
So just to clarify some things. So we did vote on this for the White House Inn. Correct.
Not increasing the height.
But we did vote on two things for White House Inn.
One for
Changing the
debate.
future land use map and changing the zoning designation.
However, we stated that the current height had to remain.
Correct.
Okay. Now, the same location that Mr. Patel is speaking to tonight is designated in this, has the same designation as the White House Inn, correct?
That is correct.
And he is not happy with the height, so he's requesting that we make a decision tonight to give him the same height as Solomia,
That's what he's
Right.
requesting.
So what we are determining, if we want to carry forth with that, we're having a discussion with with that.
Well, can
So
I-
that would come in form of somebody motioning in his behalf on this council.
Question. So, if I get it right, the request for the additional height on Bay Shore has nothing to do with the White House Inn. This is from 123rd Street south, so it'll be that Bay Shore area from Majorca to where the park is, having nothing to do with Biscayne, with the White House Inn.
Now, White House has the same zoning designation and land use designation.
Mhm.
However, under their conditional use permit that the city granted, they capped their height at 100 feet and capped the number of units to 54.
But they could increase the height from 123rd Street south on the Bay Shore to where, so they could actually separate the two properties. We already know what their decision is on the White House Inn, but if I'm getting this right, the request for the increase is south, having nothing to do with the White House.
No, that's not how you treat it.
Exactly.
You have to consider that it's the entire,
Uh,
it's the entire Bay Shore zone.
Mhm.
That particular project and that particular site is capped at 100 feet, even though the Bay Shore allows 115 feet,
Right.
and they're capped at 54 units. So that's part of their conditional use permit and a restrictive covenant that they have to sign. So it does apply to them, but their conditional use permit overrides that. Are you following?
Yeah, I
Because
follow you.
Whatever you
But
assign to
I'm
Bay
just trying
Shore,
to focus in on what the request is.
the
And
request is to change
just the
all
Bay-
of it.
Yeah, but not to do with the White House Inn.
The White House is Bay Shore, so it does apply to them.
But can't you separate them north and south of 120?
Not through this
No,
process.
no.
Can't
It's
design.
one,
Asking
it's
the
one
question.
land use and one zoning designation.
Yeah.
The difference with the White House property is their conditional use has capped them at a specific height. So you have to take the entire Bay Shore zone, it would apply to them, to everybody in the Bay Shore, but because they're capped at what they're capped at, that particular property,
Will not benefit
It's-
from this change,
right, they
if
can't.
there is a change.
If there's a change, then they are limited to what their conditional use permit says. So everything would be changing. So when we change one parcel, that's one of the questions that we had at city council and with you all, is what if we change this, does it apply to other Bay Shore properties? Well, they proffered in their conditional use permit to make their, limited to 54 units, and then city council, during their meeting, capped their height at 100 feet.
So tonight we can do one of two things. We can say no, or we can bring forth a proposal for what we would agree to.
Not quite like that, but close. What you'd have to say is that in the Bay Shore zone, we would like to recommend to city council that they change the
look at it.
height to 450 feet over after the first 6 floors of parking. So that would be if you all want to push that forward, or the other option is to do what you did for the other property owners and say you need to come back separately so that that can be studied and you can look at, you can look at it in a little bit more detail as it comes before you with their own application.
The third option is not to do anything
Thank
and just
That is
continue
correct.
with.
Sorry, Mr. Held, thank you so
discussion.
much.
There's a
Yeah,
third
and just
option.
not do anything.
Right.
In other words,
So-
we could just ask the city council to consider it.
Well, you have to vote on that, because again, you didn't ask them to consider the other request.
Right, we voted against them
So-
considering that request. So there would be a motion made whether or not we want them to consider that height, just like we did with that other vote. We are now faced with having to make that decision, if someone wants to make that motion. If they don't make the motion, then the subject is mute and we move on.
Right before we move on, Mr. Pervitel, is there a reason why you're not requesting that it meets the standards of Mallorca, which is already in existence, and that probably would give you more of an argument, as opposed to requesting the height of Solomia?
Mallorca Tower is now 54 years old. People don't want to live there. It's less than $200 a square foot. They're having financial troubles. Are we going to aspire to something that's more than 50 years ago, or are we going to aim for something higher that has all the benefits across the board? All the benefits across the board. Doesn't mean Mallorca Tower comes down now, but it does give the opportunity to have possibly 3 towers to the 2 properties to the north that can bring in more than $10 million a year. And I really ask, I appreciate if somebody would make a motion to forward this so we could get this and pass it on to the council, because I know we'll get their support there. This just makes sense from every angle. The city is not giving up anything, yet you're getting enormous income, everybody's values
All
go
right,
up,
thank-
the city
thank you,
gets
Bill.
inspired.
We understand.
I appreciate a motion,
Thank you. Dr. Besson.
I live in that general area. I see the traffic backing up across the bridge. Has anybody thought about the infrastructure available to 500-foot towers based on that area? How many units? Do we have units to allot there? What are we going to do about the traffic flows? How about the shading of the homes that live there right now with regard to the sun coming in? You know, you're not talking about a change of 25 or 50 feet. You're talking about a change of hundreds of feet. Solomia is a different area, and it's up on a hill. It's in the back. It has a huge area around it. This area would have homes based across the street from these projects. So I think we need to slow down a little bit and consider doing a study to see if that type of height structure change would be amenable to that area. I'm not against height structure changes, but let's take a look. Let's not vote to change something by 300 feet at this point.
All right, the chair is going to entertain a motion to not move this forward to the city council, this recommendation of changing the height to 450 feet in the Bay Shore area. So is there anyone that would like to make a motion on that?
To not move it forward at this time.
All right, so we have a motion not to move it forward to the city council at this time.
At this time. To allow-
Do I have a second on that motion? There's no second. The motion dies. That's it. It's a closed matter. Do I have any further comments or another motion?
You have a motion?
Can we put it forth
All right.
for the council to consider
We just
putting it
did.
at the same height at Mallorca, or no?
No, that's not what's on, that's not what that is being asked. There's a specific request for 450 feet. Either we say we move it forward to the council, or we not move it forward. So Dr. Basin made a motion not to move the recommendation to the city council.
So
There was no second to the motion. The motion dies. And as far as I'm concerned, the counselor, the matter's closed, correct?
And unless there's another motion, you can move
All
on
right.
to
Yep.
presentations and other matters.
Before I move forward, I just have one question. So if we change the height of that particular lot, that includes all Bay Shore, including the houses in Keystone and San Souci? No, only,
They're not in the Bay Shore. It's
so
in the
only
Bay
from
Shore zone.
Mallorca to,
The park.
The park.
And actually, it would pick up the old White House Inn site, because you're changing the zoning and land use height limits.
so but we're not changing.
We could exclude the White House from it, couldn't we?
No.
Well, it wouldn't matter. You can't,
Well, you could
it's
still
already
include it.
capped. It's already, their conditional use permit is already and restrictive covenant already limits that. While it would apply to
Oh,
them.
so we already have a covenant of record anyway on that.
Yeah,
So
on
it would
that one.
only affect the south of the
It will
park.
only,
Affect south of the park.
yes, while it would be applied to all in the Bay Shore, that restrictive covenant would override the height change.
Right, so
Right?
it wouldn't affect White House then.
So the thing with this thing with the height, it really does require some serious consideration because of shadowing, and other issues. And I think that's what Dr. Besson was referring to when he decided that he would vote no on turning it down, where the applicants can come in and apply as you're requiring the other property owners to come in and apply separately, where they would have to show, they'd have to do the studies themselves and pay for all of that, whereas the city would be responsible, if we're sponsoring this, to pay for those things. So that's completely up to you guys what you want to do and how you want to recommend, what you want to recommend.
Is there a motion?
The motion was not seconded.
No,
So-
on the new- on
Is
the
there a new motion?
There's a new motion. May I have the new motion again, please? There was no new motion.
I think there was a question, can we bring forth a new motion?
But we only
Yes.
have two options.
I'm waiting for someone to enter.
Well, I just want to make sure now we only have two options, which is either motion to do nothing.
You don't need to motion to do
We don't-
nothing.
or
You just
now-
don't do anything.
Yeah, and then the next motion is to accept it, so.
Move to the next
Correct.
step.
The young lady came up and, I don't want to sidetrack.
Go ahead, sir.
I think there was multiple things stated, but the young lady came up and said something about Griffin Estates, and the height stepping down. I mean, we've kind of jumped over that to talk about.
But that's not what we're discussing right now.
That's what I was
We're only
saying.
discussing that.
That is the
We're-
next
we're
No,
on-
I understand,
right.
that's what I said, still having the same discussion.
No,
Okay.
not in the same discussion, no, sir.
Okay.
This is just a request was made.
I have nothing else to add.
So what we'll be doing here, if we consider the height, is passing it it's a recommendation to the councils. And this is a zoning change, so they need a supermajority to pass this?
Planning change.
Four zero.
So they do need a supermajority? Okay.
You need 4 votes on a plan amendment. Yep.
You need to get every single person on there. So, it's up to you all. You all have to make that recommendation, or you don't. You just
Right.
don't.
I mean, as much as I would like for Mr. Prebatel to get this to be considered, we don't have the vote for this at this point, so it'll be a waste of our council. I think, I don't know, I mean,
Well,
I am open, as far as I can tell, after reading as much as I can about zoning, and talking to 3 former mayors, including Maurice Ferrer, that the last time I spoke with him, he told me that, God rest his soul, he told me that he regrets that he didn't at that point increase the height, because with that he could have made more parks and more amenities and perhaps raised. We talked for a long time before he died, and I spoke to 2 more mayors regarding the heights, and my opinion about height and the amenities that can bring, and since we need so much infrastructure, has changed, but I will strongly like the input from the residents and the community, and this is something that can be done, but it has to be done very transparent. At this point, I got a bunch of texts on my phone that drive me crazy, so thank you for coming here and tell us about the height. It's something that I personally support, but at this point, it's just we don't have the vote. In the council, at least. So we can move it forward, for consideration, but it'll be a blood drain.
So can we put a motion to just move it forward to the council
We can.
without a recommendation?
Yeah.
Without a recommendation, then there's no need to make a motion.
No, you don't have
It
to.
will just go to the council.
No.
They will take it to the council regardless of what you do.
Yeah,
Okay,
Yeah.
so
That's
let's
fine.
move forward.
yeah, let's move forward.
Okay, so so it's moving forward, is that what we're doing?
No, we're ending this discussion and,
Well, somebody just said they were gonna move it to
No,
the
we just
council.
want to be clear. Just because we end the discussion, that does not stop him from bringing it forward
It
to the
does
city
not.
council.
It does not.
correct.
That is correct.
So,
Correct. What we are determining is whether or not we, as a body, as a planning commission, support his desire for that 450 feet. Our body right here, do we support that 450 or do we reject it? We're as a recommendation, we're recommending that either we don't allow it or we allow it. That's all. That's what a motion and a vote, if we take a vote, is either to not recommend it or to recommend it.
Or we could do nothing.
Or we can do nothing.
Or we could just do
And I don't,
Right.
And that's
It
why-
will still get presented if we do nothing.
can,
You understand?
Can I have a minute?
Yes, Mr.
I
Clark.
don't, I don't think the issue, I know what's being presented is the height. What I take issue with is it's not being fully representative to the community. And this board in the past have had several discussions about making sure that all community members have an opportunity to speak on a topic. In this forum, at this time, it's a one-sided request. So, I think it's in the best interest of whoever is in support of this, it is in the best interest that we do nothing and allow them to take it before the commission. If we vote yes and it loses, our recommendation that goes before the commission is for it to not
Correct,
be approved. So,
correct.
that is all I have to say.
Right. I mean, we've had our discussion and we're letting it lay and go forward without a recommendation for or against it.
Okay.
All right? Everybody clear on that?
Yeah.
We're comfortable with it?
Mr. Chair.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and let us, yes, sir.
I'd like to recommend that procedurally, you allow the consultants to finish their presentation with regard to all remaining elements, and then you can decide how to proceed after that.
All right,
Rather
but
than
she's got
having-
14 other elements.
I
We're not
understand
gonna
they're
get
not going
that
to do
done
all
tonight.
of them, but rather than having a public hearing after each element presentation, allow them to finish their presentation so that they are not repeatedly coming back. You may have to reschedule another hearing.
I think we would have had to anyway, sir,
Well,
as long as the presentation
it's
goes.
a
and-
suggestion, do with it what you
I
will.
understand. No, I agree with you.
But don't
But-
we, council, don't we have to get this done before the 13th?
Well, that would mean that we would have to reschedule city council, or we could do, an alternative is that you bring to city council what you've already gone through. But that's sort of disjointed, so it would be, and I'll talk with,
So we
with the-
need, so we either need to finish tonight or set another meeting before the 13th.
How many items do we have left?
And
we
you
were
don't
gonna
have
start-
Thursday.
advertising time,
No.
No.
no, because are they continuing it, or is it a continued public hearing, Mr. Held?
Yes, ma'am, if you announce it, it could be a continued public hearing.
Okay, so then we wouldn't have to advertise.
Date
and
and
you
time
just try to
certain.
Figure out when you would like to have the second and final piece of it.
Anytime for me. Tomorrow, Thursday, Friday. I might, this has to be done. So I'm good anytime that is good for you.
Debbie?
Friday would be the only
I'm
open
committed
time I
tomorrow
have
night
between now and
and
the
Thursday.
13th.
Just so you know.
I've
Mr. Chair, I have a
I've already
question.
neglected my company enough.
We would only have Monday to do the meeting because the consultants is already committed tomorrow, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, no, no.
Wednesday and Thursday, they already committed. So the only date that leaves would be Monday, the 12th, and I cannot guarantee you that there's not something else going on.
12th, I have surgery to deal with.
So the only other option is to move this out into, move city council out to, in January.
If it has to be, it has to be.
And we would have to talk to Deo about having to extend it a little bit longer.
There's too many elements, too many important things in these elements that need to be discussed, and we just can't brush over them. And we need to hear input from everybody and to really dig into them. And I think most of us agree to that.
Yeah.
And we just can't
And Mr. Chair,
rush through this.
several of the residents stated that, normally it would have been packed here. So that means that there is the possibility that most residents did not know that this meeting was taking place today, and if they did, they didn't know that it was going to actually be discussing the 7-year plan. So maybe we should just take this opportunity to move it a
Can
couple
we
of
move it?
days
Can
to
we move it
give
to
them that
January?
give staff that opportunity to advertise it again, making sure that everyone gets it, that we communicate it as wide as possible, and then we come back knowing that the residents will be here, and then we can truly make a decision.
Well,
Debbie,
in
can we
defense
move-
of staff, I think the staff did a lot. And I have to tell you, I think there's a lot of ambivalence on the part of the community not coming out. I really do. I think it's up to the citizens to show an interest if they really want to get this done.
And that's the point of the website, is to allow people who would not normally come to a workshop to be able to comment on the elements, provide suggestions, recommendations. And let me turn to the
I
consultant for just a moment.
apologize, everyone.
No, that's okay.
I've got to,
Ms. Vargas, it looks like we need to move
We'll be praying.
it off of the
Okay.
12:13 agenda and move the date. We can either have it the following week, but or we can do it in January.
I just, well, I think that we need to talk to DEO for one thing and see whether that, it's one thing to move it a couple of weeks or 3 weeks, but now we're talking about a month and a half. I know there's no
So far
penalty.
away.
I know there's no penalty.
That we just need to.
I
make it
mentioned
there,
that,
okay.
but they should be informed if there's not a problem. I also, this is not the way that I wanted to be announcing things, but I have a surgery scheduled in January, so I'm going to be out of commission for several weeks. It's from mid-January on.
So the option that we have now is if we're not going to get through this and we have to reschedule, we need to reschedule. Because you're already lost your chair. We can stay here as long as you all want and go through as much as you'd like to do, or we can stop now and just reschedule. What is your preference?
If we
Well-
stop now and reschedule, do you have a proposed date early in
I
January that you can give to Ms. Love that she can consider?
I can't do it here right now. I have to look
Go.
at what's coming up.
And you
Okay.
also have
Yeah.
to, she also has to coordinate with her team and other activities. We could do it at your January 3rd Planning Commission meeting that's already set. And then follow that with, the problem is that for city council, we would not have Ms. Vargas because she will be, out with her hip surgery. And she really needs to be at that meeting. You saw how complex this presentation is, and your city planner is not up to being able to do all that because I'm not the author. So, this is a little bit problematic in changing this in a number of ways.
Okay? No, please.
This is very complicated, and this has to be done. The young lady has, that surgery can be a piece of cake, or it can get like very painful for a bit. So around 4-6 weeks. I'll come anytime that you need me to complete this, but it's putting a lot of pressure on all of us. You know, this is, we're not even, there is a lot of to be discussed. We need the public.
There's something happening.
We need the public input. I mean, it'll be, maybe this is an opportunity to try to how bad it's gonna be if we don't put this plan to the state, like within 2 months.
Well, one of the things I want to look at before we do this is I wanted to see if there were any other events on the calendar for the 12th.
Oh, by the way, there was another event today on the Scott Galvin Community Center regarding the building. So half of the people are there. Because people live for today. Today is, that building is coming today into their life, not in 7 years. So
Okay.
it's the way it is.
To the consultant, you mentioned that we're not going to really, there's not going to be no imposition of penalties or anything else like that on us.
No. No, DEO will send us a very stern letter saying you're delinquent, you have not sent us your EAR amendments in a timely manner. They are aware that they were aware that we were not going to submit them on the 1st of December. We told them that we were going to try to do it before the end of the year. I guess this will require another call to let them know that it's not going to come before the end of the year, and they will send us a letter. In fact, I'm expecting a letter. Maybe you should be expecting a letter any day. But they're not gonna come and fine you and
Okay,
Yeah.
so there's not going to be any real negative impact.
Well,
on
I'm
the
going to tell
city.
you. I'm going to tell you what the real penalty is. You and I mentioned this before. You are not able to process any other amendments not related to this comprehensive plan. You're not able to submit any other amendments to the state until you do this. In other words, the amendment that you approved today, you may not be able to submit it to the state, like the private development land use amendment.
Mhm.
If you get anybody else coming in here asking for an amendment separately, such as the Emerald Drive neighborhood, they say, let's say that they organize and they want to submit an amendment on their own, they're not going to be able to get that approved. And the Bayshore Height amendment, if they were to do it separately, they would not be able to get that approved until this gets done. Any other amendment. That's really the penalty.
Yeah, well, it's really up to the rest of the board. I'm available any night this week or any time that I'm like Dr. Medina. Any time that you need me, I'll make myself available. Or we can continue on tonight till 2 in the morning. I'm good with it, but it's really up to what everybody else feels. If we want to continue on, let's continue on. I know it's going to be at least another hour or more. Or we can reschedule, Debbie, the 3rd of January?
Actually, I'm looking at the 12th, and I don't see anything on the event calendar for the 12th, Monday the 12th.
This coming Monday?
This coming Monday. Cynthia, I'm not seeing anything on the 12th. Okay.
Does that give you enough time for community engagement?
No, of course not.
No.
I think we should try to kill 2 birds with 1 stone if we are not going to proceed tonight.
Because the ways that we have been sending this information out, Sylvia told you, is very thorough through all the different mediums. And we can send another round out. And I will talk with our communications office and make sure that they send a special one out.
Yeah, just give them just one more opportunity.
Yeah, and it'll give, and I think, I agree with Naomi, I think it'll give more opportunity to get more people here. So,
Right. I'm really anxious to get more people to go to the website and make comments on the elements and
yeah, people
take
aren't
the
gonna do
survey, and that's really where the rubber hits the road, because that website was designed to do that. And even though we've sent out all sorts of notifications, we're just not, a lot of people aren't going there, and that's really where they should be going. And that way they can do it in their own leisure time, review, make comment, take the survey, and it's not limited to a specific meeting. And then they can come back here on the 13th or 12th, whatever it is, 12th. And if you so desire to move it to the 12th, and then city council would be the next night.
Okay.
And what language is the survey in?
Well, that's the other issue.
We wouldn't
If
be able to
you
change
want
that.
to increase, as Commissioner Blemmer has mentioned, it needs to be translated, and we need time. Well, I can translate it into Spanish, but I need help with the Creole translation. So
Christina can help you with that.
Mhm.
Yeah, the city has interpreters that can
Correct.
help you with that.
So,
So
you know,
everybody's leaning towards the 3rd of January, is that what everybody's feeling?
either the 12th of this month.
Debbie?
There's ACM.
I just want to wait to be recognized first, Mike.
Mike, you have to recognize her.
Oh, yes, please.
Thank
Ricky.
you.
Yeah.
Anisha Daniel, Assistant City Manager for the City of North Miami. I just want to put a couple of comments on the record. As you already know, that there's a time deadline for this. And there was a lot of reports. I remember several months ago, at least 6 months ago, so sitting in the same room where there were residents in here talking about some of the components of this and what they wanted to see. And that was the first stages of this process. At that point, it wasn't a room full either. But I do believe, and I agree with several of you, that we do need more, we should have more participation. I agree with Karen that probably going to some of the town hall meetings. So there should have been more of that. But I'll tell you, when we do have events, the rooms are full and people go to where they want to go. And so there's an opportunity with the surveys, with them going out to several of the different events, that individuals do know about this process. This is not something that individuals are not aware of. But the main thing that I want to make sure that is mentioned is there's a lot of developments that are coming here, and our council has made it very well known that they want to make sure they understand the comp plan, what's left in the bonus units, what's left for us, how we are addressing some of the infrastructure, because we do have an infrastructure study that we've developed. And so it's important that for some of those additional developments that are coming before us, that we do have a final comp plan that has been approved and reviewed by this board. So I just wanted to kind of put that on, because as those things continue to come, it's going to hold up some of those additional developments because of not having this moving forward.
Anisha,
Yes.
if we have a meeting on the 12th, is that enough time for staff to get everything circulated to city council and that kind of thing?
It
Because
wouldn't
council meeting's the next day.
It is the next day.
That would be a little challenging to get
What would
all the
not be,
comments.
what would be sufficient? What would be the sufficient of time that you need?
That's a question that Debbie would have to answer that question, because I'm not quite sure what she needs to do to prepare. We do have the package already. We've had several meetings on going through the package, so the package is prepared as it is today, or what you're looking at or what you're reviewing tonight. I guess it's just a matter of if there are additional changes that are going to come out of this meeting that she would have to include into the packet.
Correct.
We
So-
would not incorporate the changes into the
Just
package,
document
but
them.
it would be for Debbie to be able to document
And to
all
re-
of the recommendations into a memorandum
Okay.
that would have to go to.
And then just get read on the record or something?
I believe that is correct.
Actually, normally we put it into the packet itself, and then in the PowerPoint, I usually have, when I do the PowerPoints, I usually have planning commission recommendations. This would be huge, or not, depending upon what
Right.
everybody recommends.
So I guess it depends on the number of recommendations that come out of tonight's meeting. So if there are just a few, and then based on what I've heard thus far, several of the different things that have come up have not actually moved forward. So depending on how much more there is on the 12th, if that is your will to move on the 12th, and I think the rest of them are not as no, that is not true. You have the infrastructure study, which is going to come through as a part of the other one in the resiliency. So you have those other ones. So if something comes out of those, then she would have to document that, but you'll have the next day. I'm sorry, I just needed to make sure I put those comments on the record.
So I have a question. Can we continue to proceed, or how long can we proceed tonight? Or we,
It's up to you all.
well, I guess it's a global question to the commission.
There are a lot of elements left.
No, I know, but
It-
we can continue to get to a certain point and then stop, or are we just saying we want to stop right now? I guess
Well,
that's what we-
may I
If we're gonna-
interject just for a
if we're gonna
second?
move it, we ought to stop
Because you have not yet voted on the actual land use element. So, I mean, my understanding from the chair was that he wanted to sort of go through you're voting on sort of changes, but we have not yet had the discussion about the element as a whole, and you have not voted on it. So
We haven't talked about housing either.
we haven't talked about mobility, we haven't talked about housing, which we were about to go into when we stopped a while ago.
If it's possible, I would really suggest that you at least get through housing.
Mhm.
The mobility element, I don't think you're going to see a lot of controversial items in the mobility element.
Right.
You know, housing is critical here, and if we can at least get through that tonight, that would be most helpful.
Well, what is everybody's feeling? Do we wanna move on, or do we want to meet on the 3rd?
And does that require any votes? Going through
third?
housing, that's
Hmm?
just going
Sorry?
through that part.
January
But
3rd,
then
or
can
do
make
we
that
wanna move
decision.
on tonight?
As a group.
It's gonna be late.
January next month?
Yeah, January 3rd. That
No,
would be our next meeting.
No, the 12th.
Or we could do the 12th, yeah.
The 12th seems like the
December.
12th would be the better, because as the Madam ACM said, it's kind of critical to keep this, and I'm a little concerned about pushing out that far. As you heard from Sylvia, we really don't want to get too far out, and if we could get it done on the 12th, go to city council, I would put together those comments from you all, your recommendations,
Well,
that morning.
I'll make myself available on the 12th.
Okay.
I'll be here the 12th. We can be early though. Instead of 7.
Yeah, we probably, that's up to you all. We can say, you guys, we can have the meeting at
What about
6,
you? Yeah, I'm
if you
fine with
want
that.
to start at
You
6.
good
So-
with like 5 or 6?
Yeah, that's fine. Whatever.
Yeah,
I'll make myself
really-
available.
We can do,
I mean,
maybe we could do 5 or 6. Why don't we try and 5 o'clock? What do you
Well, I don't know. Hold on. I don't know everyone's
Anytime
commitment.
I'm available, anytime, any day.
Doctor? So maybe we can start early,
Do you-
like 5, and that way, we're sure we're gonna get through it
So we can do 12 at 5 p.m.
at 5. So can everybody present make it at 5 on Friday?
I second that.
On Monday.
Mr. Bob?
Yeah, that's fine. However, are we gonna stop now, or are we
Yes,
at
we're
least
gonna
gonna try
stop
and
now,
get
yeah.
through?
We have
I-
to stop.
Yeah, we'll stop
Yeah.
now, and then
Okay.
we'll pick it up on the 3rd at 5 o'clock. Is that good?
We're picking it up when? Because I heard the 3rd and I'm hearing 12.
No, it's going to be on the 12th at
Monday.
5 o'clock.
Okay.
Monday the 12th.
Monday the 12th,
December 12th.
yeah.
December
Okay.
12th, yes, sir.
December, yep.
And then city council the next day.
Okay, Anisha, did you hear that? I did. We're gonna do the 12th at 5 o'clock.
And I'll actually make sure that PIO is posting, and make sure that they're posting it constantly every day, so that we can have more representation.
Yeah, that would be good.
And Ms. Love, an email, and besides the posting, is there any other forms of communication that we currently have that doesn't require much to do?
No, it's just really doing the same thing we've been doing, is sending it out with the communications officer, sending it out via constant contact, posting to social media, running it on the TV. We run
And
it
you'll
on
be able
TV.
to do that?
Yes, we can do
Yes,
that.
we can do that.
And we
Okay.
can
Um,
do constant contact also.
Okay.
You have the ACM saying that, and then we've actually put flyers in, our team has actually put flyers in all the buildings around the city that are
Excellent.
owned by city, buildings.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Council?
Okay.
Yeah,
Looks
Mr.
like everybody,
I-
and you
you know-
don't, and you don't want to go any further tonight. You want to quit now.
I'm fine with it, but if
I'm fine with it as
yeah,
well.
if the consensus is not to, then
Yeah.
it's all-
Council,
I'm
you're
fine.
going to be able to make it at 5 on the 12th?
Yes, sir.
Oh,
You haven't asked us if we can make it at 5.
pardon? What'd she say?
She said, you didn't ask us if we can make it.
Are you available at 5 on the?
No, I just confirmed with my team that they can make it, but I'm just kind of joking because,
They can make it.
Michael.
We need that laughter, that's for sure.
So,
Council.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I didn't hear, are you ending now, or are you going to continue for a while?
Yeah, we're going to, because it's going on 11,
Okay,
so-
then I would request that you do a formal motion to continue the hearing from tonight to the 12th at 5 o'clock.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to continue tonight's planning meeting until the 12th, December 12th, at 5 PM here in the City Council chamber?
I made a motion.
Okay, a second? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. I guess, motion to adjourn,
I made a motion to adjourn.
second? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you all very much.
Very cool. I like it.